Chapter 1149. 1 step ahead was a genius. 2 steps ahead was a monster. 3 steps ahead, and the whole world could only look up to you. With Mount Hyjal as his base equipment, Kill, Jaden's exquisite equipment, and Sardra's Moonlight Grail, which had a magic speed effect that exceeded 3 eras, Duque was able to pour out all the magic that he couldn't normally use up in 10 minutes. Admittedly, Duque's average equipment was 2 steps ahead of the current era. However, considering that he was dealing with Mana Burn and Living Bomb, which were known as the nemesis of all magic classes, it was commendable that he was able to get such dazzling numbers. Duque didn't count, but that didn't mean that the system elf didn't count. In the end, in 601 seconds of battle time, the statistics were 10 Ice Barrier, 5 Ice Bloodline, 36 Ice Shield, 386 Flash. Including the magic clone, a total of 1086 Ice Arrows were equivalent to full power casting. The damage caused was 10 times that of Baron Geddon's own vitality. Right? That's right. 10 times. Duque discovered this problem as soon as he started attacking. In a special area full of flames and lava like the molten core, the purest fire elemental leader could recover its vitality by absorbing the fire elements in the surrounding air and even in the lava. In a sense, Duque was even fighting against a small part of the molten core. At the last moment, Duque even opened the wide ice shield and pulled Baron Geddon into the world of ice and snow that he had forcibly squeezed out of the molten core and killed him. Duque was very tired. From body to soul, every corner and every molecule was full of fatigue. Looking at Jarl, the earth elemental boss that was like a moving mountain, Duque laughed. "Mortal, you actually killed the servant of the great Ragnaros?" Jarl questioned Duque in a slightly vague but extremely thick common language. Pfft. Duque laughed shamelessly. "Sorry. My hand slipped and I accidentally killed 2 of them." "Did my hand slip? Careless?" Looking at his 2 dead companions, Gehenna's, whose head had fallen off, and Baron Geddon, who had turned into a pile of high-energy bodies, Garl could not suppress his anger. "My lord will definitely turn you and your race's place of survival into ashes." Garland roared. "Hee hee." The earth elementals were all stubborn fellows. It was impossible to convince them with words. Then why did Duque and Gar spit on each other? Of course, Duque could take the opportunity to recover his mana. In a sense, a Breaking Dawn Great Mage was a magical furnace that could continuously produce mana. While they were talking, Duque's magic power had recovered to 3%. If he hadn't been attacked by Mana Burn so many times and damaged more than a third of his magic circuits, Duque's recovery would have been even faster. But for now, it was enough for Duque. Without any warning, a Duque and 8 knockoff liches of the Scourge army appeared near Garland and his Oathkeeper brothers at the same time. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. More than 36 Ice Spear technique hit the faces of Garland and his underlings with a series of rapid wind-breaking sounds. Ice Spears was a simplified version of an ice arrow. It could be shot instantly, but if the opponent was not frozen, then the Ice Spears would have no power. However, using it to provoke others was a different matter. "Sorry, my hand slipped." An ice spear hit the rough outline of Garland's face. Of course, to recognize an earth elemental's facial features, other than the pair of red eyes, the position of the other facial features had to be discussed. "My hand really slipped." Bang. Another shot was fired. "My hand slipped again." Bang. Another shot was fired. "Sorry, since my hand slipped so many times, why don't I do a manual comedy on your face?" Another shot. Duque's hand slipped for more than 100 shots. It couldn't be helped. Someone had accidentally set the ice spear to automatic firing, and one misfire resulted in so many shots. "It's hard for me too." "Don't move. Big guy, I'm drawing sh*T on your hand." "Oh no, I'm drawing a comedy." Someone who was rotten to the core yelled. While being chased by the hill-like Garland, he used the ice spear to draw something indescribable in the shape of a pyramid on Garland's face. If Garland had lungs, they would probably explode in anger. Garland's rocky body was glowing with a layer of faint red light. It was definitely a chore to kill a thick-skinned earth elemental leader. Of course, if one were to simply kite and drag the opponent around to buy time, the difficulty would plummet. The price of having a strong defense of the earth elemental was having short legs. He didn't even know how to teleport, and he wanted to catch up to Duque? Unknowingly, Duque and his phantom doppelgangers had already pulled Garland and his brothers apart. After Duque played kite for about 5 minutes, the heroes of the Alliance finally arrived. The 3 Windrunner sisters who arrived first could not help but laugh. This was because Duque was yelling as he was being chased. Then, Gavin Rad, who was the second to arrive, was also amused. This was because he saw a line of words in the common language on Garland's huge rocky chest. "I have a divine artifact on me. Come and kill me." After a short moment of surprise, everyone's hearts were heavy. This was because they saw Gehenna's, who had lost his head, and Baron Geddon, who had been reduced to ashes. Even though they were already dead, their huge bodies still exuded a fierce aura. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. They did not expect that so many people had risked their lives to kill 2 leaders, but Duque had also killed 2. Even though there were not many traces of a battle around Gehenna's, and Duque had probably killed him by assassination, a kill was a kill. No one could ignore the glory of killing the enemy leader single-handedly. If it were not for Duque, perhaps everyone would have been wiped out. The enemy leader's endless tricks made everyone's hearts palpitate even after victory. It was not an exaggeration to say that Duke Marcus was indeed the #1 person in the Alliance. Everyone could not help but feel respect for Duque once again. Seeing that the paladins who could tank the monsters had successfully taken over the batons from their doppelgangers and tanked the Oathsworn of Fire, Duke simply ordered Magni to stay behind to deal with the 6th boss Shazra, who might appear. He then gave a simple instruction on how to fight the Oathsworn of Fire. Duke finally could not hold on any longer, and collapsed into Tyrann's arms. Everyone could roughly guess the relationship between Duque and Tyrant, but Duque still attracted some attention when he hugged her so openly. Soon, everyone understood, because Duque had fainted. Tyrant smiled gently. "You've worked hard, Duque." Chapter 1150. Duque had a good dream. He dreamt that he was rubbing himself between Tyrant's Mount Hyjal to his heart's content. Then, in a daze, Duque felt a sense of comfort, but also pain. In this conflicted state, Duque woke up. The first thing he saw was Tyrant's smooth, and fair thighs. Having a lap pillow was indeed one of life's greatest benefits. Then, Duque saw a scene that made him break down. Tyrant noticed that Duque had woken up and retracted her left hand at lightning speed. Duque had an awkward expression. "Tyrant, what are you doing?" "No, I..." Tyrant stammered for a few seconds before finally admitting her guilt. She looked like a child who had done something wrong. "Don't you always use your Duke Excalibur to make people hover between life and death? No matter how I say no, no matter how I beg for mercy, you won't let me go. It's rare to see such a cute sword today. I'm thinking if I can make your sword longer and tie a slip knot or something. If possible, I'd even like to try tying a bow." Tie a slip knot? What kind of bloody bow is this? Uncle can tolerate this, but Aunt can't. Duque turned into the most ferocious wolf and wanted to pounce on Tyrant on the spot. Just as Duque was about to make his move, Tyrant's eyes flickered. Her pure face and slightly mischievous expression merged together perfectly. She smiled and said, "Duque, although I don't mind, but..." Duque was not afraid of anything except, but. Every time there was a but, there would always be trouble. As expected, Duque heard a commotion. Only then did Duque realize that the place where Tyrant had placed him was not far from the battlefield. It was only about 300 meters away. The heroes of the Alliance dragged Garland's underlings, the Flame Oath Men, out of the cave and dealt with them one by one. Then, they killed Garland before Old Six Shazra arrived. Following that, the experts of the Alliance figured out Shazra's fighting style and patterns without anyone teaching them. The clamor just now was the cheers of this group of people celebrating their victory. Ragnaros, how many followers do you have? Let's do it all at once. Otherwise, I'll have to look for them one by one. The arrogant short king, Magni Bronzebeard, raised Shazra's head high and stood on the hill of earth elements formed after Jarl's death. He put on the posture of the king of the world and laughed non-stop. "That's because your legs are too short to run," the masked female thief Valera said. The king of Steel Furnace Fort's heart was petrified. No, his entire body was petrified. A gust of wind would blow him away. The heroes of the Alliance were celebrating their victory. The oldest among them, Mograine, sat on a large rock and panted heavily. Tyrion walked over with a smile. "How are you, Alexandros?" very happy, but also a little tired." "Sigh, time and tide wait for no man." Mograine sighed. No. "You can still fight for another 10 years. Tyrion waved his hand. "What's the use of 10 years if I can't use the power of Ashbringer?" Mograine said meaningfully. "Duque told me that light and darkness are actually one. Ashbringer can also become fallen Ashbringer. I don't want the evil Slayer sword in my hand to become the plaything of evil forces one day. So, after we go back, or if something happens to me, this sword will be yours." Tyrion felt like he was choking on his words. How could a true martial artist not wish to have a divine weapon that he could use with his own hands? Duque had Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword saint. Turalyon had the royal sword, Quell Zarum. Mograine had Ashbringer. Every godly sword had its own legendary story, which was sung by bards all over the world day and night. As long as there were humans, their legends would continue to be passed down. That was the supreme glory of a warrior. As a noble paladin, Tyrion was envious, but not jealous. But when he heard that Mograine was going to pass the sword to him, his heart still failed to live up to his expectations and began to beat wildly. That was excitement. Not out of greed, but based on the excitement of being able to better destroy evil. Don't hesitate and don't be ashamed. Your noble character and firm will are worthy of this divine weapon. Actually, you don't have to. Just as Tyrion was about to continue, Mograine raised his hand to stop him. Everyone's pursuit is different. Everyone has heard Duque's hint, but I feel that instead of pursuing a false eternity, it is better to live a wonderful life. I have enjoyed wealth, bathed in the glory of Lordaeron, fought against the deepest evil, and upheld the glory of Her Majesty the Queen. My only regret is that I could not raise my son to be the best paladin, but I have no more regrets." Tyrion was silent, listening to Mograine's almost monologue. "I believe that the existence of paladins should eulogize and uphold all that is good in the world. We do not demand perfection, but we must first do our best and set an example for the world. So as a human, birth, aging, sickness, and death are inevitable processes. I do not intend to go against the laws of nature. And the noble and pure holy light must also receive a better inheritance." With that, Mograine held the long hilt of Ashbringer with one hand and handed the second half of the hilt to Tyrion. Almost as soon as Tyrion touched Ashbringer, the sword bloomed with a dazzling golden light. That was proof that the divine sword recognized Tyrion as its next master. Everyone looked back, stunned, but also gratified. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. The rise and fall of fate. That was life. At some point, everyone started applauding. At the same time, before Duque had time to warm up with his woman, someone came to find him. "Boss Duque, did you see something like this on the fire elemental leader?" The 3 Windrunner sisters, who were the fastest on this side, rushed to Duke's side. On the other side, Gavin Rad arrived. In his hand was something that looked like half a skull of some creature. The wind and thunder aura lingering on it told everyone that it was no ordinary epic equipment. Duque reluctantly withdrew his claws from Tyrants but coughed. "Damn you. Why do you want the sword? You're not the one carrying the big guy." "A sword." "A sword?" Gavin Rad's eyes lit up. "Ha! This thing is destined to belong to me. If it's a sword, Magni would never want it." Chapter 1151. Hammers are the dwarves' romance. Gavin Rad put his hands on his hips and imitated Magni's arrogant manner and tone, making all the ladies laugh. Duque was speechless for half a second. Also, I can feel the power of wind and lightning on it. It's quite similar to my power. If Gavin Rad hadn't mentioned it, Duque would have forgotten that this guy had also obtained the power of lightning from the storm altar when he went to save Kuel Salis with him. This made Gavin Rad go from being the last of the 5 Silver Sages to being on par with the other 3, second only to the strongest Uther. Now, if he had the power of lightning and the wind sword, it wouldn't be perfect, but at least it would be a good result. Okay boss, here's the question. You're so knowledgeable, do you know where the other half is? Gavin Rad waved the skull of imprisonment of the Windseeker in his hand. Duque smiled. He smiled brightly. Seeing that you call me boss so smoothly, at this point, Duque deliberately kept Gavin Rad in suspense and didn't continue. Knowing that Duque was trying to keep him in suspense, Gavin Rad had no choice but to comply. Looking at how obedient he was, he looked like a silly husky. There seemed to be a furry dog's tail wagging behind his showy golden butt armor, and he almost drooled. Jaina smiled slyly and leaped into Duque's arms. She then turned to Gavin Rad. Call me something nice. Maybe I'll let Duque tell you the answer if I'm happy. Knowing that Jaina was taking advantage of him, Gavin Rad observed her expression and knew that there was a chance. What integrity! Sell the equipment. Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. I've bowed to you. This guy didn't have any shame or self-awareness of a holy night at all. Who knew where that dense, almost solid holy light came from? If this world had one of the 4 great evil arts from Duque's original world, Duque would almost suspect that Gavin Rad's holy light was just a bunch of cheap special effects. Anyway, Jaina was happy, but the other girls were unhappy. As long as one was thick-skinned enough, they would run up and accept Gavin Rad's sister-in-law. Looking at Gavin Rad, Duque could not help but recall the past. Unknowingly, ever since he became a paladin in Lordaeron during the first year of the Dark Portal, Gavin Rad had been with him for almost 20 years. Gavin Rad, who should have died after Arthes killed his father, and even before Uther, was still alive and kicking. Now that he had broken free from the shackles of fate, it would not be a problem for him to fight for another 10 or 20 years. In the past 20 years, Gavin Rad had been with him. He had been a guard, an errand boy. Be it standing guard at the door or being trapped in the void, he had never complained. Duque suddenly sighed with emotion. Time. Loyalty. He deserved to be rewarded. Duque patted Gavin Rad's shoulder and laughed. All right. Since you called me boss for 20 years, here's the answer you wanted. With that, Duque stuffed the other half of the skull of imprisonment of the Windchaser into Gavin Rad's hand. That's right. Perhaps in the game, the drop rate of the items on the left and right sides of this artifact was only about 3%. Back in the game, Duque's buddies could not find the other half even after farming for 6 years. For example, a poor player called Recruit. Recruit? Alright, the important idiot had to laugh at him 3 times. Who told you to always make me work for you? In the real world of Azeroth, it seemed that the 2 core items of the Windchaser would definitely drop. When Gavin Rad put the 2 skulls together, a wave of spiritual power was emitted from the skulls, guiding Gavin Rad. This is... Jaina was shocked. Duque pressed down on Jaina's slender fingers. Don't worry, it's a good thing. Gavin Rad suddenly looked up. There's a voice telling me to go to Silithus. Is it really there? Duque sighed. In a sense, the real version of Azeroth was surprisingly similar to the game. Kalia leaned over and blinked. Duque, what's the story behind this sword? Duque looked at the girl's curious expressions and asked symbolically, do you want to hear it? They said in unison. That's a story from 25,000 years ago. Prince Thunderin was the son of the Windchaser, Athikir. He was the lord of the wind element, the master of the fury of thunder. He was born on a night of typhoons, a prince like the wind, hence his name, the Windchaser. In ancient times, the creation titans of the pantheon visited Azeroth. The gods were worried about the evil habits of the ancient gods. This was because the ancient gods slaughtered all intelligent creatures under their command and carried out crazy sacrifices. Thus, The Titans sent out troops to fight against the elemental creatures and their evil master. The primordial god's army was led by the strongest elemental leaders: Ragnaros the Balrog, Therazane the Stone Mother, Ikir the Wind Wielder, and Neptulin the Tide Hunter. The Titan army was led by Sargeras, the Titan warrior who had not fallen yet. The relationship between the elements and the ancient gods was more of a mutual benefit. In return for summoning them into the physical world, the elements were willing to fight against the Titans who came to change the world with the ancient gods. The elements were not united either. The wind and water elements formed an alliance to fight against the fire elements. 2 years before the War of the Dominators, Prince Thunderin defeated Ragnaros. Year 16 of the War of the Dominators, Prince Thunderin fought against Sargeras, who attacked the Realm of Wind. Sargeras was forced to retreat from the Realm of Wind. Year 17 of the War of the Dominators. Because Prince Thunderin faced the incomparably powerful Sargeras head-on, Prince Thunderin started to lose his sight and his movements became slower. Prince Thunderin loved the daughter of the wind leader Adulin, the wind-kissing elf Asher. However, Prince Thunderin knew that he would soon lose his sight, and Asher hoped that Thunderin could leave the war with her. Thunderin knew that he could not give her what she wanted, so he did not express his love to Asher. Year 20 of the War of the Dominators, Thunderin lost his sight. In the same year, as an ally, Neptulin the Tide Hunter was defeated by Sargeras and nailed to death on what is now the Black Sea coast. Year 33 of the War of the Dominators, Sargeras fell and betrayed the ancient gods. However, this was not the end of the War of the Dominators. A new war began. The flame demon Ragnaros attacked the Wind Realm. The flame demon's subordinates, Jarl and Baron Geddon, schemed to bind Prince Thunderin. Prince Thunderin was ambushed by the flame demon Ragnaros and his essence was absorbed after he died. However, because Thunderin was too powerful, Ragnaros accepted Jarl and Geddon's suggestion and sealed the prince's soul in 2 magic items. Jarl and Geddon guarded the prince separately. From then on, Prince Thunderin could not see the light of day and could not see Asher again. He did not have the chance to express his love. Year 36 of the War of the Dominators, the Realm of Wind was completely destroyed, and the wind elementals all fled. Year 60 of the War of the Dominators, the Titans once again came to this world and sealed all the elementals that rebelled against the Titans. The War of the Dominators ended. At this point, Duque sighed. Those who can save the prince will receive the prince's test and blessing. And the content of Thunderin's, Thunder Fury, Blessed Sword of the Windseeker, blessing is, Hero, may you have a love that you will not regret. Chapter 1152. Sob Sob Sob. Women were more emotional. When they heard that the Wind Prince Thunderin had not been able to see his lover for 25,000 years, Duque's lovers all felt emotional. This was especially so for Tyrant. She knew too well the loneliness of waiting alone for such a long time with so little hope that it was almost negligible. Unknowingly, Tyrant had tightened her grip on Duque's other arm. Sob sob sob. It was rare that Gavin Rad, a noble paladin who was always smiling, actually had red eyes. Yes, I understand. For love that I will never regret. It's time for me to bring Emily home. It's my fault, I shouldn't have made her wait for me for so long. Gavin Rad brushed away the hair on his forehead that was wet from the intense battle, then turned around, leaving Duque and the girls with a glorious view of his back. As they watched him stride away, almost everyone had the same thought. Gavin Rad was indeed a good man who dared to take responsibility for his actions. It seemed like the world was about to put on a good show of lovers getting together. At this moment, Elysia spoke up, a little confused. Wait, why do I remember that Gavin Rad is already married, and his wife's name isn't Emily? The atmosphere suddenly fell silent. At that moment, all the girls looked at Duque. Wait, what does Gavin Rad's death have to do with me? Guilty, Duque quickly typed with both hands to prove his innocence. Oh no, he raised both hands to prove his innocence. It's all your fault for teaching Gavin Rad the wrong way. Queen Sylvie directly sentenced Duque to death. Duque felt wronged. He did not expect that giving the wind sword would cause him to be implicated. Could it be that he had to risk the wrath of all the warriors, thieves, and paladins in the world just to steal this divine sword? Just saying. Just saying. For a moment, Duque felt as if he could feel the resentful gazes of his companions who had only obtained half of the skull of imprisonment of the Windseeker. He thought back to the time when he picked up Azenatha's warblade that no one wanted. He would trade it to the thieves he met and enjoy the pleasure of being scolded, but the other party could not do anything to him. I really am a mage of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Speaking of which, he had killed 6 of Ragnaros's subordinates in one go. Even with Lager's vast army, he would still feel the pinch. Duque wasn't too worried about the upcoming battle. Now, Duque could enjoy the pleasure of touching corpses to his heart's content. The first boss dropped Cenarian boots, and adding the drops from the minions, there were Cenarian brand helmet, gloves, belt, and bracers. In a single breath, he had armed Brol Bearskin, a poor worker. Duque said proudly, "Hee, look at how red I am. None of the items I looted went to waste." Before he could finish, Jaina pinched his waist. "Aren't you embarrassed? Do you dare to look Sister Kalia in the eye? The weather is so good today. There were no clouds in the sky. Nonsense. How could there be clouds on the ceiling of the cave?" Duque looked left and right, but refused to look at Kalia, who was mainly equipped with excellent equipment. It couldn't be helped. When Lordaeron's city fell, the Lordaeron royal treasury was also destroyed, and the better equipment was taken away by the liches. Even though Kalia was the queen, she couldn't find a set of epic equipment after she ascended the throne. After all, exquisite equipment wasn't easy to find. Kalia secretly tugged at Jaina's sleeve. "Jaina, it doesn't matter to me. Don't blame Duque. After all, no one knows what spoils of war we can loot." Jaina said angrily, "We all know that. But I just can't stand that scoundrel master. He clearly dropped nearly half a set of Demon's Heart warlock equipment that no one wanted, and he's still pretending to be lucky. Kalia, let me tell you, exquisite equipment can't be too much. At a critical moment, not only can it save your life, it can also save the lives of your comrades." Of course, the eye-catching top-grade equipment would make people anxious and want to call Yao Yao to report that there was a pretentious criminal committing murder here. Similarly, after enjoying the bonuses of high-tier epic-grade equipment or even divine equipment, it would be very uncomfortable to drop back to the original level. Originally, it would take 100 frost arrows to deplete the mana, but now, it would be useless after 80 shots. How could they get used to it? Duque also knew that his hands were black, and hurriedly swore that if he touched the corpse again, he would chop off his hands. He ran over and hugged Kalia when no one was looking, and blew hot air into her ear. "Kalia, don't worry. After we defeat Ragnaros, we still have to go to Blackwing's nest to find trouble with Nefarian. When that time comes, we will have better equipment." Since the new year, there had been a rare opportunity to be alone. Her Majesty, the Queen of Lordaeron, was hugged by Duque's slender waist. Of course, she would listen to whatever Duque said. "Well, as long as everyone is safe, I don't care about anything else." Sigh. That's the good thing about girls. Duque couldn't help but glance at Tyrant. He had really led the High Priest astray. After killing the 6 bosses, the situation suddenly opened up. The powerhouses of the Alliance had more important things to do. "Master, is that right?" Vanessa stood in front of a 10-meter square flame rune and raised the bottle in her hand that was emitting a blue glow. "Pour it down." Duque nodded. What was in the bottle was no ordinary thing. It was the water essence of Duke Hydraxis, who had obtained the water elemental energy of Hydraxia. After killing the leader of the Molten Core, and then destroying the energy supporting the Molten Core, the Flame Rune would be able to shake Ragnaros' control over the Molten Core. That was not what Duque wanted. Duque, Ronin, and the other mages worked together to cast a spell, and built a larger 3-dimensional magic circle around the Flame Rune. As the water essence fell down, the Flame Rune let out a squeak, similar to the sound of metal being quenched in a blacksmith's shop. In the next second, 2 Breaking Dawn mages and a group of Radiant Moon mages activated the magic circle, isolating all the energy coming from the molten core. On the flat ground, a cold wind suddenly swept up, causing the other powerhouses watching from afar to shiver. Suddenly, the shadow of a huge water elemental appeared on top of the destroyed flame rune. It was naturally Duke Hydraxis. Well done. Your Excellency Duke Marcus. You are more powerful than I thought. I thank you on behalf of the water elemental energy of Hydraxia. Duque smiled and took a step forward. When I sent Ronin as an envoy, I said that we have a common enemy, didn't I? Chapter 1153. Once the water elemental Duke Hydarsis heard this, his dark blue eyes, which were formed by the condensation of high-purity water elements, immediately shone with a dazzling light. Thus, we have a common enemy. Then my previous proposal, Duke Hydarsis said in a decisive tone, we water elementals do not have as many twists and turns as you humans. You have fulfilled your promise as an ally, so we will naturally abide by the covenant. Then, Hydarsis raised his fingerless right hand that was like a sandbag. A huge fountain with a diameter of at least 20 meters and a height of 100 meters suddenly rose behind him. Then, elite water elemental warriors continuously poured in. They were taller and bullier than the average water elementals, and the strong elemental aura lingering around them could be easily felt even by non-spell-based professionals. They scattered in 4 directions in an organized manner, and then some of the weaker water elementals began to set up new magic arrays on the ground outside of Duque's magic array. Mograine came to the smiling Duque's side. You want to do something big? Very big, very big. The smile on Duque's face made Mograine feel an inexplicable sense of anticipation. That's right, before entering the molten core, Duque did say that he wanted to build a forward operating base inside. But it had been more than a month since they entered, and Duque did not mention this at all. In this place where there was only the seemingly eternal light of the lava, if not for Duque's extremely strange concept of time, probably no one else besides Tyrant, who believed in the moon goddess, would be able to figure out time. Yet, Duque's timing was shockingly accurate. Mograine and the others had almost forgotten about the forward operating base. Now, it seemed that they had to kill the opponent's leader and snatch the energy node of this underground space before they could open a base. 15 minutes later, when more than 2,000 water elementals had tossed around the surroundings, the powerhouses of the Alliance were pleasantly surprised to find that the surrounding environment within a radius of 3 kilometers had really changed. Even with Duque's wide domain ice barrier, to resist the dust and lower the temperature, the air was still a little bad. Because inside the shield, there was no way to avoid Duque's rich mana. Now that the surrounding water elementals had erected a huge water elemental shield, the air instantly became fresh and natural. Because the water element that Hydacia used was the most basic water element in nature, which was different from the water element that Duque transferred from the element's realm using his magic energy. That was not all. Duque and the others immediately opened a medium-sized teleportation gate. The first to be teleported over was an entire group of Dalajan mages. They immediately got to work and prepared an even bigger portal. Duque didn't do anything. Ronin was the one controlling the portal's magic formation. After fiddling with it for a long time, the portal was ready. A large number of dwarves and gnome craftsmen and mechanics drove a large number of strange machines through the portal. One had to know that the amount of mana required for teleportation was proportional to the weight and volume of the object being teleported, as well as the strength of the life form. The mana used to teleport this group of troops. Just look at the high-purity magic crystals that were priceless a moment ago turning into dull crystals that were casually thrown to the side, and it was obvious how terrifying it was. The master craftsman, Gerben, greeted Magni, and led his gnome engineering team to a suitable place under the protection of the water elemental troops to set up the machinery. At this time, Duke Hydacis came over. He bowed slightly. The first fulcrum has been set up. The Hydacia assault team is on standby. Once you have rested, you can set off to the next flame rune location. Duque nodded. Although we really want to destroy all the flame runes in the molten core as soon as possible, I don't recommend splitting up or setting off immediately. It's fine. Daoist has been waiting for the chance for revenge for 25,000 years. I don't care about this moment. Leave the protection to us. Please rest well. At this time, Jaina came over and pulled on Duque's sleeve. Hey, don't you think there's anything different here? Jaina pointed at her mage's peak. There's nothing different. It's still tall and straight. Duque stopped halfway through his sentence. It was indeed a little horrible to look at. Originally, Jaina's mage's peak looked like a white steamed bun. It was big and white, but now it looked black. It was like a black cornbread made from the skin of wheat. Duque's heart ached when he saw it. So, he eagerly went to Duque Daoist and made a small request. The Alliance's hero squad started setting up camp. It was a large lava pillar that rose from the ground all the way to the top of the lava. Close to 30 people from the hero squad set up camp around the pillar. When it came to enjoyment, Duque was definitely at the level of corruption and depravity. He could make things difficult for anyone but himself. Duque chanted an incantation, and according to the small authority he got from Daoist, he made the land that was already occupied by water elementals spurt out a small spring. Duque grasped the air with his left hand, and pure arcane energy ground the pillar at high speed. The base of the pillar, which was originally sloping at a 45-degree angle, was forcefully carved out into terraced ponds that looked like terraces. Duque waved his right hand, and a strong wind blew, sending the ground's sand and stones flying. When the clean and warm spring water filled the ponds, the heroines all let out sounds of admiration. Wow! It's so beautiful! Look at this side of the pond. It's actually been polished so smoothly, and there's not a single scratch. Duque, if you can't continue being a mage, you can consider becoming a craftsman in my palace. It had to be said that a place that was like a hot spring park was definitely a great miracle in the molten core, which was filled with lava, sparks, and hot air. Duque had used his memories of the hot spring hotel he had been to before he transmigrated to create a battlefield hot spring park, and it easily won the favor of all the heroines. Women were born with a love for beauty. Even if they had to stick dust on for the sake of battle and make themselves dusty, their love for beauty would only grow stronger. When the hot spring was built, they erected a tall wall according to their request. After Jaina set up a magical formation to prevent prying eyes, the women shouted and rushed into the hot spring area. Just as Duque was about to follow them in, the pitiful Duque was rejected at the door. It's not just us sisters who are here, Ilucia said with her hands on her hips. Duque, it might not be a good idea for you to come, Kalia said softly. Queen Sylvie was the simplest. She immediately put up a sign written in the common language at the door: perverts and Duque are not allowed in. Chapter 1154. Duque was depressed. I can barely fight the molten core, and I still have to help you queens make a hot spring. Don't tell me I won't get any benefits after that? Is that even possible? Sometimes, men were creatures that courted death. The more they can't get, the more they want. Duque didn't even think about doing anything at first. He just used invisibility. Cause trouble. Cause trouble. Today, I will establish myself as the queen of the harem. Duque tiptoed around the sign that symbolized humiliation and quickly and quietly snuck in. The wall at the entrance was erected by Duque, so how could he not leave a back door for himself? With a light press, a beautiful revolving door appeared on the seemingly intact wall. Unexpectedly, as soon as Duque flipped in, a magical message came. In the hot spring, the girls were chattering and teasing. Men were discussing women. Women were evaluating men. This was a truth that would never change throughout the ages. Will Duque sneak in? Kalia asked her sisters in a low voice. All of them answered in unison, definitely. Queen Sylvanas added, I know that guy won't be able to hold it in. But don't worry, the wind will tell me he's coming. Sister Sylvanas, are you going to deal with him? Ilusia asked. Of course. We can't give in to that guy too much, or he'll have no bottom line. Queen Sylvanas was resolute. So I was thinking if Duque sneaks in, should I shout, no, to lighten the mood, or don't stop, to provoke him? Tyrant cupped her face, which always looked pure and holy no matter what time it was. Her words caused a few of the thin-skinned fellows to blush. So female drivers can't afford to get hurt while racing. However, unexpectedly, even after the girls finished bathing and playing, Duque still didn't come. Did anyone see Duque? What happened? Jaina asked the people around her after coming out. Ronan, who was in charge of the portal, replied, Master? He seems to have something urgent and went back through the portal. Urgent? What kind of urgent matter would make the commander of the Alliance personally rush over? Needless to say, it was an urgent matter. Black Rock Mountain was littered with corpses. The blood that should flow had long since dried up. The violent heat roasted everything that came close, regardless of whether they were alive or dead. There were thousands of orc corpses, but none of them had their backs facing the Black Rock Tower. There was not a single wound on their backs. All of them had died because their bodies had been torn apart by a powerful force. In the distance was a vast and boundless crimson plain. Nearby, a small branch of the tribe was desperately running towards the plains at the foot of the mountain. Their mounts, the velociraptor, had long since died on the mountain, leaving only a few trolls carrying a few burly figures on the crudest stretchers. One of the orcs on the stretcher was clearly covered in wounds, but he was still shouting at the top of his lungs, "Put me down! Put me down! I'm going to fight it out with those bastards." "What are you going to do?" "You're courting death. So be it. I've had enough. I've had enough. Woking, leave me behind. Let me complete the last glory of the orcs." Grom, who was wrapped like a dumpling on the stretcher, struggled with all his might. Was that a roar? Was it a cry? Was it a plea? Even Grom Hellscream himself was confused. Glory? Is it the tribe's glory to be wiped out in Blackwing's nest? Didn't your dead friend Orgrim try to retreat back then? Good. You orcs are brave enough. Then I, Woking, will be the coward who ran away. Let me tell you, Grom, even if I have to bear the consequences, I will protect you from the Black Dragon and send you back to Sar alive. No. Sar. No, I can't face Sar. 3,000 elites were wiped out. It's my fault. It's all my fault. Grom's tears flowed down his face. It was no longer possible to tell which part of his face was blood, which was tears, and which was sweat. Shut up, Grom. We agreed to punish the traitors. Even if we are guilty, Sar and I are also guilty. The key now is to leave here alive and think of a way to take revenge. Woking held a spear at the back of the team. His injuries were not light either. His left arm was torn off from his elbow. If it was any other race, this would be a lifelong disability. Woking was a troll. In theory, as long as his head and heart were not injured, and with enough nutrition and time, he could infinitely recover. Thus, after a bloody battle, everyone's injuries were about the same, but Woking's condition was the best. Revenge? How? There's a magic array here. All teleportation and magic messages have been disrupted, but I sent out a distress flare as agreed. Now, we can only hope that the Alliance will keep their promise and send a rescue team to save us. At this point, Woking's mouth was full of bitterness. The tribe that was once incomparably powerful now had to ask for help from their former enemy. This could not be more ironic. Suddenly, a terrifying roar came from behind them. Roar. It was the roar of an ancient beast. Grom was in despair. Damn it. That thing actually chased us out. It's over. Unless the Alliance gathers all the strong ones, there's no way they can compete with it. Not only Grom, but even Woking was in despair. He looked back and finally stopped. Yes, it's too late. Even if the Alliance bandits saw our flare, when the distress signal is sent out, they can organize a rescue team to come over. They can probably pick up our bones. A giant red beast rushed out from the Black Rock Mountain toward the gate of the burning steps. It spread its huge red wings and soared into the sky. With just a few flaps, the shadow of its wings had already covered the tribal chiefs. It was an incredibly powerful primordial red dragon. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Woking and his men. Strange things also happened at this time. It was clearly the most terrifying pursuer and one of the main culprits of the destruction of the 3,000 elite orcs, but its words were filled with the darkest despair. Oh, go away. Leave me. I can't control myself anymore. I don't want to kill you, because your deaths will make my sins worse. Although Woking wanted to refute, if you don't want to kill us, don't attack. But Woking knew that the actions of the red dragon had nothing to do with its will. It was also a tragic existence. Its name was the fallen Valistaz. Chapter 1155. What Wuxia didn't know was that Valistraz was originally a powerful ancient red dragon. He was originally instructed by the Red Dragon Queen to spy on Nefarian, who was causing trouble in the Blackrock Spire. Unfortunately, the Red Dragon clan was clearly not made for covert operations. The Black Dragons were. This was like asking a burly Tauren to be a bandit and steal the wallet of a sneaky night elf bandit. The outcome was naturally as hilarious as it could get. In the end, Valistraz was ambushed by the Black Dragon King, Nefarian, and was brainwashed by Nefarian's evil magic. It was like the whisper of the ancient god in Zuth. Valistraz had fallen. Even though he seemed to still have his own will, his body had already carried out Nefarian's orders to hunt down the Horde. That's right. The Horde's early attack was very successful. Their elite troops almost captured the entire Blackrock Spire and almost killed the great traitor of the Horde, Rend Blackhand. Just a little bit more. Rend fled to another place called Blackwing's Nest in a panic, and the Horde elites led by Grom chased after him. Then, all of a sudden, he encountered this powerful and terrifying immemorial red dragon. In the midst of the chaotic battle, the huge and oppressive body of the red dragons suddenly appeared. Valistraz's first dragon breath severely injured the Tauren chief Cairn Bloodhoof, who was at the front, followed by Grom and Varrock Salyafar. Wuxia was forced to lead everyone to retreat. If Wuxia was a traveler with the surname Du, he would have retreated immediately. Because even though he was seriously injured in the ambush and only had 1/3 of his HP left, Valistraz still had nearly twice the HP of Baron Geddon, who was killed by Duque not long ago. And the fallen Valistraz was originally the most famous gold recycling machine in the game. This was because he had caused countless teams to be wiped out in front of him. He had made players kneel at his feet and had their progress blocked to the point where they wished they were dead. Countless guilds had disbanded because of this. He was both a super boss and an existence that carried the resentment of countless players. At this moment, in a place with no cover, they encountered a terrifying crimson dragon that was half a step into the demigod realm. Even the strong-willed Wuxia and Grom could not help but feel despair. Grom suddenly sighed dejectedly. Ah, Woking, I really want to see the day when the tribe is truly revived. Wuxia smiled bitterly. Me too. Was this the darkness caused by the loss of all the flags? Was this the last sound of the tribal horn? Or was it the despair of having no way out? The sky was so bleak that not a single cloud could be seen. The land was barren and lifeless. Looking in all directions, he could not see the slightest bit of hope. Grom stared blankly at the sky. Bastard Duque, I don't want to owe you a debt in hell. All of a sudden, Lord Howl felt as if he had seen something in the sky above him. Is that a black dot? Or is it a blood stain left on his eyeball? Grom struggled to open his eyes and was shocked to find that the black dot seemed to be growing at an unimaginable speed. In less than a second, it became a behemoth that occupied his entire field of vision. This is Roar. A dragon's roar that seemed to come from ancient times shook the eardrums of every tribal warrior. Wuxia raised his head in shock and glanced at it, then closed his eyes in pain. Because that was the color of the enemy, black. No one knew how many warriors of the tribes had died under the claws and mouths of those young dragons with black wings. Crimson Dragon and Black Dragon, does the goddess of fate think that we are not dying fast enough? Suddenly, Wuxia laughed wildly. His laughter was full of desolation. His two white curved tusks trembled under the sun, as if he was laughing at himself. At the very last moment, A shocking change that none of the warriors of the tribe had expected happened without any warning. Xianxia? Are you foolish degenerate? You don't deserve to call my name. Xianxia? Everyone in the tribe was dumbfounded. In their memory, wasn't this female black dragon who stirred up trouble in Stormwind City and almost made it to the upper echelons of the alliance sealed by Duque? Without giving them the time to react, the two ancient dragons, one red and one black, who were definitely the largest in terms of size, actually started fighting fiercely in the sky behind the tribe's small team. The fallen red dragon, Veristaz, spat a mouthful of dragon breath at Xianxia. Unexpectedly, the black dragon, who seemed to be injured as well, nimbly dodged to the side, perfectly dodging the flames of the dragon breath. Even though the fallen red dragon had turned its long snake-shaped neck to face the black dragon princess halfway, the black dragon princess still dodged the dragon's breath as if she had foreseen it. Taking advantage of the fact that the crimson dragon had yet to recover from the aftershock of the dragon's breath, Xianxia, who was also a dragon, knew the weaknesses of her kind the best, and seized this rare opportunity to suddenly accelerate to the extreme. Her back was almost touching Velastras's lower abdomen, and her claws swept past. In a battle between dragons, it was absolutely a taboo to send one's back to the enemy's claws. However, if there was a powerful dragon knight on the dragon's back, then it was a different story. A golden holy light that could not be emitted from the black dragon suddenly dazzled the eyes of everyone in the tribe. Duque's divine sword? As old comrades, Grom, Wajin, and Kane, who had just woken up from a coma, would never mistake it for someone else. As far as they knew, there were only 3 divine-level swords in the alliance. Perhaps they would mistake Ashbringer and Quel'Thazarum, but they would never mistake Duque's dried tofu. Because Duque's divine sword was too sharp, completely different from the 2 door-like double-edged swords. In that case, could it be, the experts of the Horde suddenly realized that Xianxia, one of the core leaders of their former enemies, seemed to be on their side now. This answer sounded ridiculous, but it was extremely close to the truth. Xianxia and Duque's cooperation had already severely injured Veristaz in the first attack. Xianxia, thank you. Although I don't know why you are helping them, you have lightened my sins. The fallen red dragon sighed a little untimely as it began to retreat under the command of Nefarian's soul. Duque pulled Xianxia's reins. Stop chasing. You don't want to face your brother in this state. Chapter 1156. Woo-woo. A huge dragon with a mouth full of fierce teeth let out a low cry like that of a small animal. This scene was as strange as it could be. The other side muttered, I don't have the face to see other people of my race. What a disgrace. On one side, the giant black dragon was obediently descending from the sky, and the tribal chiefs were very conflicted. If they hadn't clearly seen that the one sitting on the back of the dragon was Duque, Duque was holding a long dark blue magic rain, and the black dragon's chest had the insignia of the Alliance and the Marcus family, they would have probably turned around and run. Even so, the other troll warriors couldn't help but tighten their grip on the weapons in their hands when they saw such an enormous beast sweep away the sand and pebbles, and when she looked at them with her fierce and vivid golden eyes. Grom actually wanted to run, not because he was afraid of death, but because he was ashamed. Looking at Duque, who jumped down from the back of the black dragon, Lord Howl's rough mouth with fangs wriggled for a long time, and finally looked straight into Duque's eyes. It seems, I owe you another life. If you were an orc, you would have earned my life and loyalty. Duque shrugged. Unfortunately, I'm not. Wajin quickly interrupted. Did you know that Nefarian was in Blackwing's nest? Wajin did not want to raise such a question, but Grom felt that he owed Duque too much. If a veteran expert like Grom made a big event that crossed races and factions to join the human race, it would be very, very troublesome. Even as wise as Wajin was, the only way he could think of was to interrupt. Duque turned to look at Wajin and sighed. I know that Nefarian, the king of the Black Dragons, is standing behind Rend Blackhand, but according to my understanding of Nefarian, coupled with Xianxia's testimony, I think that unless someone fought in front of Nefarion's highest throne in Blackwing's Nest, with his pride, he would never personally attack anyone. Wajin was suddenly speechless, unable to say anything else. At this time, Grom, who was still on the stretcher, waved his hand. Enough. Woking. I was clear about my identity and the mission on my shoulders. No matter what happened, the fact that the Black Hand brothers had betrayed the tribe was still an ironclad fact. Besides, the Alliance is using the Horde to restrain Nefarian. Aren't we also using the Alliance to deal with Ragnaros? Grom's open and above-board words made Wajin feel as if his neck was being choked, and he was unable to speak for a long time. In the end, he could only let out a long sigh. Grom gritted his teeth in pain. The Horde needs the Alliance's power, and the Alliance needs the Horde's power. Please help the tribe this time, and the tribe will definitely repay you. As for me, as long as I succeed, I won't even frown even if I have to incinerate my soul. A man, a real man, a spit, a nail. Even though Duque had expected this, he was still moved by Grom's request. Duque smiled and reached out his hand to shake Grom's huge and scarred hand. Welcome back to the Alliance and the Horde. At this moment, Dworkin and Kane were visibly relieved. In any case, with the support of the Alliance, at least the situation would not collapse. At this time, Dworkin finally asked a question that he had always wanted to ask. Duque, is the Black Dragon behind you, the previous Xianxia? In fact, it was not only the heroes of the Horde who were confused, but the Alliance was also very troubled. The first time was when Deathwing pretended to be the Lord of Presto and almost became the King of Alterac. The second time was when Xianxia pretended to be Countess Katrana and almost stole the supreme power of Stormwind. In addition to strong combat power, the second label of the Black Dragon race was that they were sinister and cunning. However, such a powerful and cunning Black Dragon, and the princess of the Black Dragon race, was now tied to Duque's hand, quietly staying behind Duque as a backdrop. This was really incredible. She won't betray me now, right? She's my exclusive mount for the time being. Mount? The eyelids of several big bosses of the Horde, Dworkin, Grom, Kane, and Varrock, twitched wildly. In the poor Horde, only the chief was qualified to have a wyvern as a mount. All right, comparisons were odious. When comparing goods, you have to throw them away. Their mounts were dragons, and so was Duque's. But wyverns, even if they had the word dragon in their name, were actually just third-rate subspecies of dragons. How could they compare with Duque's mount? As a tribe that once had a red dragon mount, the older generation of orcs was very clear about how big the gap in strength was. It was already amazing to be able to ride a 1,000-year-old adult dragon. No one thought that they could ride an ancient dragon. Not to mention the princess of the Black Dragon, who was a demigod. The kind of shock that seemed to dislocate their jaws were all written on the faces of the big bosses of the Horde. There was no difficulty in stuffing an ostrich egg into their gaping mouths. At this time, a terrible draconic aura rose behind Duque. You bastard! When did I recognize you as my master? Don't think too highly of yourself. I just deceived you and took the opportunity to heal my wounds. Today, I will take this opportunity to rebel. Before the princess of the Black Dragon could finish her declaration of rebellion, a huge arcane energy palm descended from the sky and directly pressed Xianxia's dragon head, pressing her dragon mouth to the ground. For a moment, Wajin felt that Xianxia actually wanted to resist. She was on par with Velastras and dodged the dragon breath that was as fast as a gust of wind, but in front of Duque, she felt an inexplicable sense of awe. Be it her reaction or movement, she was clearly slower than Duque. The result of her hesitation was that her huge dragon head was pressed down by the magic hand and kept rubbing on the ground. Bastard master! You will regret it. You will definitely regret it. But Xianxia seemed to be struggling uncontrollably and did not notice that the way she addressed Duque had changed. Do you really want to rebel? You're going to tear down the tiles if you don't get a beating for 3 days? Today, I will let you have a taste of the dragon taming whip. Duque raised his hand and a special 9-tailed whip appeared. It was hard to imagine that such a huge black dragon would show a timid expression in front of a small nine-tailed whip that was less than half a meter long. "Don't hit me. I'm sorry. Master Duque, I'm sorry, I was wrong." The huge black dragon whimpered like a small animal. Chapter 1157. Under the watchful eyes of the horde powerhouses, the huge black dragon shrank rapidly. Under the effect of ultimate transformation, in just a second, the black dragon disappeared and was replaced by a timid noblewoman. She clutched her red dress with both hands and bit her lower lip. Her beautiful face was full of a pitiful expression. She was so pitiful. No one would have thought that just a moment ago, she was an arrogant black dragon with her nose in the air. If they had not witnessed all of this with their own eyes, anyone would have thought that she was a little wife who had been bullied, and not a ferocious black dragon. Grom and the other horde powerhouses once again felt that their worldview had been turned upside down. The ancient red dragon, who was originally a righteous one, had fallen into the claws of evil. The black dragon princess, who was originally a villain of the evil faction, had become a human's mount, shouting the name of evil while doing things of justice. What kind of comedy was this? Duque did not give them more time to daydream. He directly opened a portal and said, "Let's not talk about anything else. Go back to Stormwind City and rest for a while. The Alliance still needs the strength of the horde powerhouses." Wajin looked up and said, "Please allow us to contact Chief Sar." "No problem." The entire Blackrock Mountain had been fortified. Nefarian had obviously put in a lot of effort to manage this place. In such a rich fire element area, it was easier to repel other elements. Nefarian also used this reason to prevent other magic messages. For others, it was really difficult to open a portal here. But Blackrock Mountain was not Nefarian's territory. Below his lair was Ragnaros's territory. Under the premise that many nodes of the molten core had been destroyed, Duque's teleportation became possible. Suddenly returning from the blazing hell and breathing the clean air, Wajin, Grom and the others felt like they had been in a lifetime. With a call from Duke, a team of priests from the Storm Cathedral ran out to heal them. There was even an elite team of thieves who sneaked into Blackrock Mountain to rescue the surviving orc warriors. Orcs, trolls, and Tauren were all relatively simple races. For this, the horde powerhouses were very grateful. After settling them down, Duque turned his head and glanced at the black dragon princess who was shivering behind him. His body recovered a little. His temper flared up again. The person in front of her was clearly a human, but in Onyxia's eyes, Duque was 100 million times scarier than the demons of the Burning Legion. "What do you want?" "Let me tell you. I'm the dignified princess of the Dark Dragon, Onyxia. Let's not talk about anything else for now. I'm only asking for the corresponding position based on my strength. Is that wrong?" Onyxia's lips were trembling in human form. Duque chuckled. Of course, in the eyes of a certain female dragon, it was a sinister grin. If not for that declaration of rebellion, I might have been able to accept it. However, the premise of rebelling was to be dealt with. Do you dare to say that at that moment, you didn't have any thoughts of rebellion? Onyxia was the first to reply. Then her aura weakened a little. "Probably not. Come here." Duque grabbed Onyxia's wrist and opened a portal to drag her back to Duke Marcus' residence in Stormwind City. When Duque dragged Onyxia through the portal of the Duke's residence, the gatekeeping wizards and guards were stunned for a moment, and then immediately lowered their heads. Chief Steward Makarov hurried over and waved his hand. The servants and guards of the Duke's residence immediately retreated from the rooms and corridors that Duque passed through like a tide. Onyxia was dragged away like a weak girl. She seemed to have forgotten that even in her human form, she still had the power of a dragon that could kill mortals in seconds. In her perception, Duque's strength was so insignificant that she could tear this seemingly weak human wizard into pieces with just a little bit of force. She knew very well what would happen to her if she followed him. As arrogant as she was, she also had the urge to break free from this restraint. During the days when she was separated from Duque, she even secretly studied soul magic. A magic layman like Turalian could not monitor her at all. She had already found and obtained what she wanted. It was a soul countermagic that originated from ancient times. As long as Duque did not control her in the first 3 seconds of her casting, she could directly attack Duque's soul, and then obtain victory in a direct confrontation between souls. She could even turn around and control Duque's soul. At that time, all the humiliation she had endured, all the torture she had suffered, could all be avenged in one go. Just that one flaw. That one opportunity. However, at this moment, she bit her lip and was dragged away like a puppet. When they finally reached the bedroom, Duque closed the door and threw her to the ground. She knelt in fear. Of course, she knew that the level of magic protection here was far inferior to that of Duque's old nest, Karazhan. She even felt countless times that she could destroy Duque at any time. But every time she wanted to do it, she would think of the magical scene of Duque's resurrection at the Lake of Lovers. That was not simply immortality, but a magical power that was more similar to time reversal. If it was really time magic, then for Xianxia, it would be truly unsolvable. Failure had made her a little cowardly, and she began to constantly tell herself, "I can't act rashly before I grasp the secret that he cannot be destroyed." She did not realize that it was her cowardly attitude that caused her to lose the courage to resist Duque and continue to succumb to him. It was like an elephant in a Thai zoo. Many tourists expressed surprise that an elephant weighing 7 or 8 tons would be chained by a chain the size of a thumb. In fact, elephants had experienced countless struggles against the chains when they were young and failed miserably. As a result, when they grew up, they still subconsciously believed that they could not break free from such chains. As soon as Duque approached, Xianxia subconsciously shrank toward the wall. Unknowingly, her knees were against the corner of the wall, and her chest and face were pressed against the cold wall. What welcomed her was not a whip, but a gentle touch. Duque said softly, "Idiot, actually being my mount is your ultimate salvation." In the spiritual realm, Duque once again transmitted the video processed by the system into the princess of the Black Dragon's mind. It was a realistic image after a lot of post-processing by the system. She saw her dragon head being hung on the gate of Stormwind City again and again. She clearly saw the despair and final ferociousness on her dragon face. Is this my ultimate fate in other timelines? A teardrop rolled down Xianxia's beautiful face. Chapter 1158. In the movies before Duque transmigrated, special effects and no special effects were 2 different worlds. For example, the Scarlet Witch without special effects was like a psychopath when she performed. With special effects, she was an omnipotent mutant. Although the special effects that Duque sent to Xianxia during the psychic attack weren't 50%, they weren't clear and exquisite enough. It was more like a kind of confusing inducement. This time, no matter how she looked at it, it looked like something that came from the river of time. Xianxia knew very well why Duque had disappeared for 4 years. She had always been fearful of this peerless powerhouse who had conquered for 10,000 years and tricked the Burning Legion. Now that Duque had given her something, it further solidified Duque's position as the master of fate, no, at least the peeper of fate. How could Xianxia not be afraid? At this time, Duque's voice seemed to contain the magic of fate, full of surging power. Those who block the general trend of fate, they will be crushed into pieces. So what if they are powerful? What happened to Netherio, the wing of death? What happened to Sardris, the king of demons? There's also Archimonde, whose bones are still hanging on a dead tree on Mount Hyjal. They may be resurrected, but unfortunately, that would only be a deeper failure for them. Fate will ultimately be in the hands of mortals like us. Xianxia's delicate body trembled non-stop. Even though she knew that this was actually Duque's pressure on her, she had to believe it. Too many powerhouses had already fallen to Azeroth. This was more like a curse. An irresistible curse of fate. Xianxia felt as if she could hardly breathe, as if she had returned to the moment when she was struggling for her life in the Twilight Forest. Pain, despair, helplessness. She knew that Duque's words were more like a trap to deliberately make her sink and give up on herself. But she always felt that as long as she still wanted to live, it would be impossible to escape from Duque's clutches. Her body had recovered a lot, but she didn't have the courage. The short period of freedom he had in the watchtower when he had nothing better to do was more like the last illusion before he sank into oblivion. Xianxia suddenly understood why her mother had been hiding from her father all her life even though she was so powerful. With the left side of her face pressed against the cold wall, Xianxia's sexy red lips spat out a sentence: "Black dragons don't believe in feelings, nor do they believe in promises." However, if a female dragon were to be bitten on the back of the neck, that is fatal. No matter how unwilling she is, she would give up resisting and recognize the other party as her conqueror. She would even be willing to bear the other party's children. After saying that, Xianxia silently twisted her neck, making her fair neck look even more slender. Duque understood tacitly and gently pushed aside Xianxia's cloud-like black hair that fell on her shoulders. Then he revealed his white teeth and gently bit the back of Xianxia's neck. That soft texture made it impossible to imagine that this was actually the neck of an extremely sinister and cruel black dragon. Xianxia's body trembled, and another drop of dragon's tear slipped down her face. However, when the dragon-taming whip penetrated the dragon's cave with ease, Xianxia suddenly let out a long and relieved dragon roar. "Oh! From now on you're my mount. If you mess around in the alliance, it's like slapping my face. I won't let you go. If you really do something that I can't protect you from, I can only let the other powerhouses hang your head at the gate of Storm City. You may meet your big brother soon. He and I are not on the same side." "Very good. Come, take my 256 styles of dragon-taming whip first." Woo-woo, both of them couldn't sleep the whole night. At noon, Duque met Wuxia and the others. These guys actually became energetic. It could only be said that the big men of the tribe all had monster-level recovery abilities. Needless to say, Wuxia was a troll. When Duque urgently called Benedictus to help him expel the fire elemental power in his body, Wuxia's broken arm began to regenerate at a high speed. Grom, Varrock, and Cain were not much worse off. When the holy light healed their wounds, these guys actually cried out that they were hungry at 1 o'clock in the morning. This made the royal chefs of Storm's stronghold wake up in the middle of the night and cook for them for most of the night. These guys ate and drank until 5 o'clock in the morning before they fell asleep with their stomachs full and satisfied. Duque looked at them, who slept until 12 o'clock, and could not imagine their miserable appearance yesterday. Wuxia also glanced at the humanoid Xianxia standing quietly behind Duque. Before Duque could answer, Xianxia had already answered, "No. After a good taste of the dragon-taming whip, I will be obedient." It had to be said that as Countess Katrana and Rosso, the princess of the Black Dragon was definitely at the level of a movie queen. Even Wuxia could not imagine that this dragon-taming whip was not the dragon-taming whip. Her complex expression of hatred, indignation, fear, and submission made Wuxia immediately believe that Duque did not completely control her. Only Duque, who was connected to her soul, could feel the calmness and submission coming from her soul. Grom stepped forward. "We have contacted Chief Sar, and he has ordered that the Blackrock Spire incident will be led by the Alliance, and the rest of us will fully support the Alliance's actions. So, give the order, Commander Duque." Duque did not refuse. For a true martial artist, not even a minute of rest was torture. Especially the shame brought by the death of 3,000 soldiers, they could not sleep well. Duque waved his hand. "Nefarian needs time, and so do we. So, I give the order to kill the fire demon King Ragnaros first." "Understood." Duque turned his head. "Xianxia, you too." Xianxia tilted her head and snorted as a reply. Duque looked to the northeast of Stormwind City, where the Blackrock Spire was located. "Nefarian, wash your neck and wait to be slaughtered." This was different from before. When the fulcrum of the molten core was still intact, opening a portal was simply an extravagant hope. Even as a Breaking Dawn mage, Duque could not do it. But now, it was completely different. With the portal, even if Nefarian dared to come out, Duque was confident that he could deal with him immediately. Now, apart from the Fire Demon King himself, No one else could stop them in the molten core. Below the molten core, Duque's lovers were still a little disappointed that Duque did not come to the hot spring to attack. When they saw the angry eyes of the Horde's elders who kept calling the black dragon bastard, they understood the answer. It turned out that Duque had gone to save the day. Chapter 1159. However, would the crowd ignore Xianxia who was standing behind Duque? How is that possible? More than half of the most powerful paladins in the alliance were here. Almost as soon as Xianxia stepped through the portal, they sensed the presence of the Black Dragon Princess. Unexpectedly, they did not sense a strong evil aura or will. Of course, the dragon race did not rely on dark energy to survive. But the Black Dragon Princess who appeared in front of them at this moment had completely subverted their impression. She appeared in her dragon form on Lover's Island, full of anger and absolute arrogance. That was the domineering attitude of believing that she could solve all problems with power even after being exposed. Now, no matter how she tried to hide, she could only hide from the orcs in the tribe. Not to mention the alliance, even Wajin might not be able to fool them all. Even though the firebird on her body had proved that her body had recovered, she hid behind Duque unconsciously, trying to use Duque to block everyone's sight. However, her beautiful face, sexy body, and bright clothes that never changed made her one of the focal points of the crowd no matter how hard she tried to hide. She gave off a very contradictory feeling. Aurelia took a step forward, and the Black Dragon Princess almost instinctively wanted to step back, but Duque grabbed her arm. This was obviously a little rude for a lady, but Xianxia lowered her head. "Oh, Duque, aren't you going to introduce this lady to us?" Although the Windrunner's elder sister used the calmest tone, but in the ears of the Black Dragon, it sounded like a joke. Duque looked up. "My new mount." Duque snapped his fingers. "Xianxia, show everyone. Slow down, don't scare people." In the end, Duque did not forget to inform Duke Hadasis. "Tell your men to stay away, don't get allergic when you see the Black Dragon." A little helpless, a little sad, and a little resigned. After letting out a soft sigh, everyone watched as the deep, black eyes of the Duchess in a luxurious red dress with black trimmings gradually turned into a flowing golden color. Slender black scales gradually appeared on her forehead and cheeks, glistening in the light of the flowing lava in the distance. She raised her snow-white neck and let out a long howl, her long black hair flying behind her head. When her waterfall-like hair disappeared like a dream, a pair of black wings with holes grew on her back. His forelimbs had turned into sharp claws and were covered in fine and solid scales. The red and black robe seemed to have fused with his body and disappeared without a trace. She revealed her dragon body, and a tail sprouted from her hip. When she raised her head, she had fully taken on the form of a dragon. Even though everyone was mentally prepared, everyone's eyes were still filled with shock. The black dragon was rapidly growing in size. 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. In the blink of an eye, she had grown to more than 30 meters long. When she spread her wings, the wingspan was almost 50 meters wide. The ceiling formed by the lava was at least 300 meters high, but the moment she grew in size, everyone had the illusion that she would trample through the solid rock floor, break through the ceiling that was equivalent to more than 100 stories high, and smash the huge stone pillars supporting the cave. Roar! The mighty dragon roared, causing the surrounding rocks that were not strong enough to fall along with the roar. Many people subconsciously tightened their grip on the weapons in their hands. But in the next moment, the dumbfounded Alliance heroes were amused by Xianxia's equipment. The tailor-made armor on her chest with the emblems of the Alliance and the Marcus family was fine, but the most amusing thing was still the seat at the back of her neck and the long reins. It seemed that Duque had treated the dignified Black Dragon Princess as a large griffin. "Queen," she walked up and put one hand on Duque's shoulder. "What a great mount! My dear Duque, why don't you give her to me?" Before Duque could reply, Xianxia had already let out a roar and spoke in the common tongue. "I'll eat you." Duque's eyes flashed, and he said sternly, "What did you say?" Xianxia's dragon neck shrank, and she began to use a roundabout strategy. "No. I refuse to let anyone other than you ride on my back. Not even your woman. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself and eat her. Queen she did not care, and turned to look at Duque, blinking her right eye. Such a disobedient mount. Why don't we kill it? Kill it. Tyrant raised her hand in agreement. Kill it, the girls said in unison. Xianxia was trembling non-stop. Yes, good idea. The dragon head can be placed in the Iron Furnace Castle Adventurers Association. Magni agreed loudly. But as soon as he finished speaking, Jerbin knocked him on the back of the head. Turned. Why did you knock me? The dwarf craftsman put his hands on his hips. This is Marcus's family matter. Why are you interrupting? Can I tease her? No. Jerbin said decisively. The results were out. Of course, it was a group of heroines who happily rode on the back of the Black Dragon Princess. Xianxia, who was in a difficult situation, naturally brought nearly 10 female heroes for a ride nearby. It was fortunate that it was her. If it were an ordinary adult dragon, it would not have been large enough for so many people to stand on. After all the trouble, Queen she looked satisfied, but the whisper of the wind almost choked Duque to death. Alright, now, let us discuss your sin of not attacking any of our sisters last night. Wait. Something was wrong. Didn't they say that XX and Duque are forbidden to enter? Wasn't this godly development no different from beasts are worse than beasts? Or did Queen she find out that I tame dragons? Duque had a toothache. Just then, there was a series of loud rumbles in the distance. Everyone who had been in the molten core was familiar with this sound. It was the footsteps of the molten core giants. But they had never heard such continuous footsteps. Duque's eyes narrowed. He flipped and jumped on Xianxia's back. Pippy dragon, let's go. Xianxia's yellow pupils rolled at Duque. Then she flapped her wings and flew into the air. After flying for 5 kilometers, the enemy was already in sight. It was an army of giants that covered the sky. Giants that were 20 to 30 meters tall were rubbing shoulders with each other. They did not have a formation and merely squeezed towards the Alliance's camp like a tide. However, numbers were combat power and destructive power. If this giant army was left alone, it was enough to destroy the entire camp. Chapter 1160. Even Xianxia, who had the body of a demigod, was shocked speechless when she saw such a huge army of molten giants. Not even a dragon roar could be heard. It was a long river formed by tens of thousands of molten giants, and among them were hundreds of large fire elementals, king of flames. This was beyond the limits of what conventional military force could handle. The tank army that Duque had painstakingly built up for 20 years was meaningless in the face of such a force. To a dwarf, explosions were an art form. Unfortunately, the cannons that used gunpowder as their main weapon of destruction were useless in front of the molten giants who were natural fire elementals. That's why I hate elementals that cannons can't deal with. Duque muttered. At this moment, the fire elementals noticed Xianxia who was flying in the air. In the long line, an even brighter fire dragon ignited. The King of Flames had already raised their 3-fingered fire hands. It was as if there was a silent command that only the fire elementals could receive. Countless fireballs vibrated in unison. The next moment, Duque and Xianxia could clearly see a cloud of fire flying into the air, and the dim ceiling of the cave was dyed blood red. The cloud of fire did not stop, and it spewed up like a geyser. Hey, bastard master, do you have any ideas? Although I play with fire, I'm not immune to fire. Xianxia almost peed her pants. This terrain was terrible for dragons. A cave that was hundreds of meters high was a very high height for humans, but for WMs, it was just a matter of time before they could climb up. On the surface, the Black Dragon Princess could easily increase the distance by climbing and let the fireballs dissipate in the air. But this was the molten core, where the concentration of fire elementals was extremely high. The distance and power of the fireballs were several times stronger than on the surface. Even if she turned into a human, she would not be able to find a place to hide, and she would still have to take it head-on. She was very resistant to fire, but she was not immune to fire. Blast the rock stratum above us, Duque ordered. I don't know how to drill. Xianxia continued to shout. Cut the crap. Duque rarely used soul punishment when he was taming her, but he actually used it now. Woo! The black dragon princess blasted the ceiling of the cave with her dragon breath. Bang! Countless stones of different sizes flew everywhere and fell to the ground. Duque's pupils constricted, and he mumbled as if he was sleep-talking, wind. Dephone. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew near the top of the cave. This was a space dominated by the Fire Elemental Lord. Casually using the Frost Elemental Lord would only consume mana. With Duque's strength alone, he could pull out thousands of Flame Kings to fight against them. That was just asking to die. Duque had an even more ingenious method, wind magic, which belonged to the nature element. This was a skill that even Xianxia, who had lived for God knows how many years, was amazed by. Countless stones of different sizes began to assemble at a high speed under the drive of the Wind Elemental Lord. In less than a second, the irregular rock fragments, big or small, no matter how different they were put together into one solid stone hemisphere after another as if they were playing with a jigsaw puzzle. These stone hemispheres were like protective shields that were layered on the outside, blocking the path of the fire cloud. Crack, crack, crack. It was a continuous series of explosions. Xianxia did not know how many layers of the stone hemispheres had been shattered. She only knew that she could feel the heat wave that was spreading and hear the sound of the rock stratum exploding. However, there was still no fireball that hit her body after 3 seconds. Did she pass without any injuries? What are you waiting for? While Xianxia was still in a daze, Duque had already taken out a long whip from his interspatial bag and whipped it on her dragon's buttocks. For her, who had thick skin and flesh in her dragon form and was protected by thick scales, this whip did not feel much at all. However, the experience of being whipped by a 9-tailed whip in her human form made her awake. She turned and rolled her eyes at Duque, then flapped her wings and made a beautiful 180-degree turn in the air before turning around and running. The Fire Elemental Lords could not fly. They could only watch the man and dragon leave with their bloodshot eyes. Seeing Duque return on the black dragon, everyone in the camp heaved a sigh of relief. How's the situation? Mograine was very nervous. Not good. More than 4,000 molten core giants and more than 500 flame kings. It's not a force that we can handle head-on. Duque reported the numbers that the system elf had scanned. After purposely making it general, everyone was shocked. The hero team would need more than a minute to kill the molten core giants no matter how fast they were. 4,000 of them, regardless of whether they attacked together, even if they just stood there and let you kill them, they would still die of exhaustion. Some of the new members of the team, such as Sally Whitemane, were already a little green in the face. Woken suddenly raised his head. If we can't fight them, then, Duque continued, we can only outsmart them. Grom patted his chest, making a muffled sound like thunder. Tell us, we'll do it. Duke Hydraxis also nodded. Duque pointed to the cave in the distance. That was where Duque killed Gehennas and Baron Geddon, the 2 leaders. Do you see that? Yes. I need the Water Elemental Legion and the strong people of the Horde, along with Sally, Tyrant, and the 5th squad just now, to hold this place. Defend to the death? Woken asked. Duque shook his head. There's no need. We don't need to race against time before Nefarian makes any real moves. Ragnaros lost 6 of his leader-level subordinates. Even if they have elemental bodies, they can't be resurrected in a few years. Since we destroyed their node once, we can destroy it again. You guys try to hold on. If you can't, retreat through the portal. What about you and the main force of the Alliance? Duque raised his right thumb and pointed to a mount behind him. I'll lead the assault team riding the dragon to deal with the leader of the molten core giants, Gyurmanj the Incinerator. We almost became barbecued meat just now. Xianxia protested. Shut up. Mounts have no right to speak. The sad princess could only shut the dragon's mouth bitterly. Aurelia stepped forward. Are you confident? That was just a reconnaissance just now. I was caught off guard by accident. This time, 10 minutes later, Onyxia carried more than 20 people through the previous area again, but this time it was much safer, because Duque had created many phantom images of the Black Dragon in advance and rushed to the front. The phantom images that lacked the draconic aura could not deceive the strong people, but it was not difficult to deceive the low-intelligence King of Flames. Looking at the countless fireballs in the air, it was more like watching a fireworks show that had nothing to do with them. Chapter 1161. Seeing Onyxia's powerful and agile figure gradually disappear into the distance, Grom's ambitions seemed to be ignited. I don't know why, but I just think of my old friend Zulu Hid. Although the Beastmen of the Dragonmaw clan had used dishonorable means to control the Red Dragon clan, that was a glorious era when Beastmen could also become Dragon Knights and conquer the sky. It wasn't like now, where everyone could feel the withering of the tribe's talents. Most of the older generation of orcs were killed, and the rest were old. Among the new generation of orcs, there were few that Grom looked up to. Only Sal and Wajin were leading the way. Moreover, the professions were very unbalanced. Most of them were melee professions. There were only a few ranged professions, and there were no heroes like human priests who could recover. If the tribe fought with the Alliance, as long as the tribe could not kill the Alliance's recovery professions in the first round, it could basically be declared the tribe's failure. In fact, not only Grom, but Agrima's great chief Sal was also anxious. The Rustwater conglomerate represented by the goblin trade prince Galavix felt that it was completely unprofitable to trade with the Alliance. After the Shameless Alliance attacked the Booty Bay controlled by the goblins chose to side with the tribe, which Sal accepted without hesitation. The goblins only offset the technological advantage that the gnomes brought to the Alliance. This was far from enough. The tribe seriously lacked magic heroes. At this time, a guest that Sal didn't want to see brought a proposal that he couldn't refuse. When he saw the real guest brought by the guest, Sal trembled and his mouth moved for a long time. Finally, he put his right hand on his chest and bowed. That was the tribe's most ancient etiquette. Of course, Grom and the others were still fighting in the molten core and didn't know what was happening far away in Agrima. They had to focus on the battle in front of them. The Tauran chief Cain, who had recovered his spirit, continued to use his terrible momentum to fight against Archimonde. He directly rushed towards the molten core giant that was about to punch him. The difference in size was almost 5 times, but it was the molten core giant that was pushed back. The old bull snorted, "Slag giant, your strength is simply unworthy of the giant name." Grom leaped up high and cleanly slashed the molten core giant's neck with Blood Howl. If it wasn't a fire elemental creature, this axe alone would have killed it. But it didn't. Even though half of its neck had been chopped off and its head was hanging low, it still swung its arm at Grom, trying to slap him to death. At this moment, a chilling stream of ice rushed into the giant's body and very craftily entered the giant's body through the wound that Grom had created. The blazing flame heart in the molten core giant's body was instantly extinguished by this cold spring, and the giant suddenly stopped moving. After killing one giant, there would be hundreds and thousands of giants surging over. That kind of continuous pressure, if it was someone with a weak mind, would have easily collapsed. The leader of this group was a peerless expert who had been through a lot. Haha, not enough. Not enough. If you want to punch me, you have to be 10 times stronger. Cain was very excited. In the Battle of Mount Hyjal he was suppressed by Archimonde, but now the situation was completely reversed. A totem pole, a super heavy weapon, was used by Cain as if it was as light as an embroidery needle. The molten core giant had never seen such a way of fighting. The idiots who thought that Cain was holding a hollow pillar were all dismantled into stone in the next moment. Duke Hydas's body grew at least 10 times larger, and the 8 or 9-story tall molten core giant only reached his waist. Not only him, but a dozen strong Hydasis water elementals also stood up. They were no less tall than the molten core giant, and they stood in a neat formation with hundreds of other water elementals, pouring a storm of wind and rain toward the exit of the cave. Soon, everyone realized the benefits of defending the dangerous place. The molten core giants were too huge. Even if they disintegrated into a pile of high-temperature stones after they died, they still quickly blocked the seemingly wide line of defense of 500 meters. The giants at the back had to foolishly climb over the bodies of their dead companions. Wajin shouted, "Don't block the entrance, just let them squeeze like this." This was a place near the first boss of the molten core. A cave with a slightly lower terrain connected the main area to this side. On both sides of the cave were rivers of lava that were difficult to pass through, but this was only for mortals. As one of the fire elemental creatures, the molten core giants did not matter at all. Blocking the cave would instead cause the giants who had nowhere to go to take a detour, causing more pressure on the line of defense. Wajin simply set up a pocket formation, or rather, a crane wing formation, while stalling for time to kill the opponent. The situation became tense with the introduction of an elite molten core destroyer into the battlefield. This guy's strength was beyond everyone's expectations, and even Cain had to show some real skills. The two behemoths fought on the blazing ground, turning the sky and earth upside down. If this was a street fight, it was estimated that most of the city would be destroyed in an instant, and several blocks would wail in the flames of destruction. The hard rock ground collapsed inch by inch. Every step of the giant produced blazing flames. Even the fire had a tendency to spread further with the wind. "You want to kill me? You're not strong enough." Cain roared. A Tauren and a giant, their fierce battle made the ground solid. The ground was like broken waves stacked layer by layer, and there were shocking cracks full of flames everywhere. It was like an active volcano just happened to erupt under their feet. On the other side, Xianxia kept complaining, and the heroes could not help but smile bitterly. "Be grateful to be on my dragon's back. If it wasn't for the guidance of fate, you would never have this honor in your lifetime. I'm telling you, don't move, or I won't be responsible if you fall." Duque held his forehead. He did not understand why a female black dragon who was born to play tricks would become like this after becoming a mount. Was this arrogance? Or some kind of distortion? Duque did not know, but this might be a good thing. Duque sat on the dragon's back on the dragon's saddle, which was theoretically the dragon's throne. The system kept scanning, and finally, a huge red outline of a human figure. The next moment, more red outline monsters entered Duque's vision. Even seeing the three red names, Duque still had a confident expression on his face. "Found you." Chapter 1162. "Hey, Mount, northwest by west, fly straight." Duque's words shut Xianxia up. The Black Dragon Princess didn't say anything else and turned to fly. Perhaps it was a tacit understanding from taming dragons. Duque would call her name when he was happy, but when he called her Mount, it meant that Duque was unhappy. If Duque dared to mess around when he was unhappy, he would suffer. Xianxia could ignore anyone else's words, but she had to listen to Duque's. Seeing the smug black dragon almost tucking its tail between its legs, the other experts of the alliance were all snickering. My axe is already thirsty for more." Magni held an axe in one hand and a hammer in the other. He struck a pose that he thought was very cool, but he almost fell because of a certain dragon's sudden descent. If he wasn't tied up with ropes, Magni Bronzebeard would have been the first dwarf king to fall to his death in the tens of thousands of years of history. After pulling the cursing Magni up, everyone turned to look at Duque. Facing the burning gazes, Duque felt a sense of heroism. The familiar faces overlapped with the epic stories in his mind. At this point in time, they might have died in the original history, or they might have been wronged and wasted their time in the countryside, or they might have fallen helplessly to become the undead and slaves of fate. There were noble kings and queens among them, as well as lowly bandit leaders. There were the most noble saints, as well as the most depraved villains. Now, because of Duque's stirring of fate, they were all gathered under the same flag, under Duque's command. Not only them, but the forces they had were also Duque's chess pieces. At this moment, Duque felt like he was the king of the world. He could cut off the flow with a flick of his whip. Even the sea could evaporate. Even the mountains could be filled up. Duque, a once lowly transmigrator, now, none. The flame of passion was rolling in Duque's blood, and the excitement factor spread to every corner of his body. Mograine said sternly, "Commander, please give me your orders." The group of high-ranking experts spoke in unison. "Please give the order, Duque. He would not pass on this responsibility. I can basically control the fire demon guards. Mages, turn the guy I marked with an arcane spell into a sheep." Jaina asked in surprise, "Sheep transformation? That's a spell that can only be used on beings with low intelligence." Duque rolled his eyes at her and smiled without saying a word. Duque was clearly saying, "Is it my fault that those guys are retarded?" Jaina laughed, and then immediately became serious again. "After using polymorph 3 times, the arcana technique's power will weaken. I suggest that you use other types of magic. Then come again." Duque paused. "Jaina, star, Elusia, flatbread, Ronin, diamond, and triangle. I'll use polymorph to control one and help kill Aurelia." Mark the monster with Hunter's Mark. Duque raised his hand, and marks made of arcana energy appeared on his palm. Yellow stars, orange discs, purple diamonds. Understood. The 3 mages said in unison. "Aurelia, mark the biggest one with Hunter's Mark." "Leave it to me." The mature female ranger's eyes lit up. "Tyrion, control the 2 dogs. Don't kill them." "Okay." "Magni, you'll carry number 1 to number 3. Gavin Rad, number 4 to number 6. Sidan, number 7 and number 8. "Understood." The 3 answered in unison. "The rest of you, fire with all your might. Kill the biggest one, Gyurmanj the Incinerator, then kill number 1 to number 8. Kill the Saffron Pioneer." "Yes." The others answered in unison. At this moment, Onyxia suddenly turned her long dragon neck. "Then what about me? How can someone as powerful as me not have an important mission?" Duque smiled. It seemed that after biting the back of her neck last night, she had really adapted to her new identity. She was undoubtedly an extremely proud dragon. Even if she was reduced to being a mount, she still could not let go of her pride. Blindly suppressing her was not a good thing. If he were to ride a dejected, empty shell with the appearance of a giant dragon, even Duke himself would feel that it was meaningless. "All right, I'll mark you with a black dragon's mark later. I'll leave the most important one, Major Domo Executus, to you. He's the leader of the entire Molten Core, second only to Ragnaros. He's the culprit who commanded a large number of monsters to attack our water elemental node. The most important one." Onyxia's yellow eyes lit up when she heard this. Even though she knew that Duque was probably bluffing, the Black Dragon Princess still wanted to save face. Anyway, it sounded like the most important enemy leader was left to him. "He's the key to us fighting against Ragnaros. You can beat him half to death, but you can't kill him. Before we deal with the other guys, you can play with him. Hee. Leave it to me." Onyxia was drooling. Torturing the enemy is my favorite." On the other side, Major Domo was on the verge of breaking down. He had long realized that Duque and the others had come with ill intentions. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the combat power of Duque's group. Moreover, because Duque had killed the first few leaders too quickly, even though it looked like they were swarming together, they were still being defeated one by one. In particular, the deaths of the Molten Hound King, Magmadar, and Garland were a huge blow to the Molten Core. With the death of the Hound King, all the wandering Molten Hounds were automatically killed. As the leader of the Earth Elementals here, Garland was dead, which also meant that all the Earth Elemental monsters would not be resurrected. In the end, when he wanted to gather an army, he could only control the Molten Giants and the Fire Elementals. A moment ago, he did not think that the enemy would be able to pass through thousands of giants and fire elementals. Even the Air Force would not be able to do it. That was until he saw Onyxia soaring nimbly over the top of the cave. At this moment, he really looked like he had eaten *T. Why? Did Nefarian lie to me? He claimed to be against mortals, but he sent his sister to join them. Or is there another reason? No matter what the reason was, the enemy had come, and they wanted to execute the plan to kill them. There was no doubt about it. Gyurmang, Saffron, the enemy's elites are all here, let our army come back. His idea was good. He wanted to let the main army turn back and annihilate the enemy elites here. But in a moment of desperation, he forgot how smart his subordinates were. A moment ago, the giants had received news that they were going to attack. Suddenly, they were told to retreat, which directly caused chaos at the front line. Grom and the others were pleasantly surprised to find that the enemy was in a mess. Chapter 1163. Not to mention the molten core giants, even in the European world before Duque traveled to, there were often spectacular scenes of a fully armored knight chasing hundreds of farmers. It wasn't that the commander didn't want the farmers to gather and teach the knight a lesson. It was just that commanding a group of illiterate and ignorant cowards was a very tragic and painful thing to do. If the molten core giants were still lining up and trying to break through the narrow cave in an orderly manner, it would be a complete joke now. They collided with each other, and their stone bodies flowed with lava in the cave. Dazzling sparks and continuous sounds of rocks colliding could be heard. Some of the giants continued to charge forward without a care, while others began to turn around and tried to retreat from the not-so-spacious cave. It was a complete mess. The molten core giants had strong bodies, but since God gave them strength, it also took away their agility. Of course, Major Domo didn't have time to care about this, because he saw a huge palm. It was a unique palm technique that descended from the heavens. Jumping high from Onyxia's body, with the recoil from the arcane impact, Duque plummeted to the ground like a cannonball. He put his hands together and looked pious. The hundreds of magic circuits in his body, large and small, circulated and generated magic to the extreme in one breath. In the next instant, Du-Mok exhaled and spoke with an imposing manner. Get out of my way. In any boss-level battle, how to start the fight was a very rigorous study. If you didn't start the fight well, it wouldn't be surprising for the whole team to be wiped out. Mograine had suggested letting him go first. After all, he had invincibility. Duque shook his head and refused. They didn't know how chaotic the situation would be when the three bosses were added together. Duke knew that the seventh boss, Saffron, had 4 minions. The eighth boss, Gyurmang, had 2 molten hounds that wouldn't die together with the king of hounds. The ninth boss, Major Domo, was the most ridiculous. He had 8 minions, 4 of which were mages and 4 of which were melee fighters. The minions of the 3 bosses were not ordinary elite monsters. Strictly speaking, they were rare elite monsters that were difficult to deal with. With so many minions gathered together, the 3 bosses would be able to unleash their skills. It would be too easy for the team to be wiped out. Duque could be resurrected, but once his team was destroyed, it would be impossible to assemble another hero team of similar standards. Duque wasn't willing to gamble. Therefore, he directly went up himself. This palm strike of Duque's perfectly imitated the stance of the Buddha's palm. Of course, this had nothing to do with Buddhism, Taoism, or martial arts. This was an attack condensed purely from the purest arcane magic. It looked like it was put together, but it was actually extremely violent. The 3 leaders and their guards raised their heads high. Each of them felt an inexplicable throbbing in their hearts. They first stared at Duque, who was descending from the sky, and then looked around one after another, because the surrounding environment seemed to have suddenly become unfamiliar. This was the molten core, a blazing hell. Everything here was related to fire and heat. In the past hundreds of years, there was not a single existence that was unrelated to fire. The magma was forever boiling. After a little cooling, new ground was formed. Then, new magma overflowed and continued to change the geographical environment here. Whether it was the ceiling of the cave that was hundreds of meters high or the solid rock stratum beneath their feet, this place was constantly changing. But what came into view now seemed to be a still world. The fierce wind that emitted the smell of sulfur seemed to be frozen. Every piece of black stone lay there quietly. There was neither the sound of the wind nor the roar of any living beings. In the distance, the blazing light of the magma that was like the sun passed through the purple-blue barrier formed by Duque's spreading arcane energy. It seemed strange. It was terrifyingly quiet. It was as if everything in the world had suddenly fallen from extreme motion into extreme silence. The blazing world seemed to have cooled down. It wasn't voluntary, but it was being oppressed by an even more powerful force, forcing them to crawl silently even if they were unwilling. At that moment, all the fire elemental creatures felt that the familiar fire elementals were retreating, leaving them in fear. An even more powerful force began to descend with Duque's fall. That was the power of arcane magic. It used an irresistible force to push away the surrounding fire elementals and was dominating the elemental activity within a radius of hundreds of meters. No, it was like rewriting the laws of space and forcefully taking over everything. "This is impossible," Executus yelled. "Today, I will make the impossible possible." With Duque's angry roar, a huge magic palm the size of a football field slammed down. Other than the largest and most burly incinerator, Gurigman, almost every fire demon subconsciously covered their heads. But in the next moment, they subconsciously opened their eyes and found that their bodies, which were not light, were scattered by the powerful impact. They couldn't control themselves. Even the heaviest molten hound beside Gurigman flew more than 10 meters away and then spun strangely on the ground under the powerful impact. The lighter fire demon elites trembled. Their bodies were the lightest as they flew into the sky and landed heavily on the ground. Every Alliance powerhouse's heart was on fire, because what they saw was a completely different scene. Duque's slap was like the start of a billiard game, smashing the opponent's strict formation into pieces. Originally, this was a sunken cave. Anyone who wanted to enter must first pass through the lava giant leader Gurligman, who was guarding the cave entrance, and waste time with this super meat shield. Because of Anixia's existence, the Alliance commandos were able to directly go over Gurigman's head and attack the opponent's weak fire demon group. Duque's aggro this time was even more ingenious. Because the focus of Duque's magic attack was not to kill the opponent, but to create impact. The moment the compressed arcane energy exploded, all the guards around the three bosses were blown away. Not only that, but at the same time as the explosion, Duque used arcane energy to condense pre-agreed marks on each of the guards. Squares, triangles, pancakes, numbers from 1 to 8. When Onyxia had only beautifully turned half a circle on the battlefield, the Alliance powerhouses had already jumped down from more than 10 meters in the air and found their targets. Ba, 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 ba. In the blink of an eye, the 4 guards turned into silly lambs and rolled around on the ground. Chapter 1164. Gather, assemble. Majesty, 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 Executus shouted in panic. It was not his fault for losing his composure. He had never been a courageous person. He had good management skills, but he lacked the courage to make up his mind. He also did not have the strength to fight against 1,000 men. In the fire elemental world where strength was everything, this meant that he could only be the second brother. He could never be the leader. The fire demon was born with a weak physique. Coupled with the fact that he was used to being bossed around, he had long forgotten about fighting. However, he did not have a single guard around him. Instead, he was greeted by a gigantic black dragon. The black dragon's ruthless and evil face revealed a human-like smile. "Ha! Go on and shout. No one will come to save you even if you scream your lungs out." Onyxia subconsciously called out the words that Duque had said to her the most at night when he was taming the dragon. However, it was quite fitting, wasn't it? Majordomo was dumbfounded. His face immediately darkened. "Onyxia, you are violating the covenant that the king of the Black Dragons, Nefarian, made with us. The king of the Black Dragons will not let you go." Onyxia laughed shamelessly. "I don't want to say it, but I really don't mind my beloved brother's head being cut off by my master and hung at the gates of Stormwind City." You. Majordomo was about to explode from anger. the black dragon's huge body approached. "Yo, little fire demon, you and I are the only ones left here. Pass." Pass. Major Domo trembled. Teleport. As a manager, Major Domo naturally had all sorts of life-saving skills. For example, he could teleport his enemies into the lava to take a bath. Unfortunately, this trick did not work. The magic resistance of a demigod giant dragon was ridiculously high, not to mention the amount of magic power required and the difficulty of teleporting such a huge existence. The problem was that Major Domo did not have any special attack skills. "Ragnaros will protect me and not let me get hurt," he shouted. Suddenly, a huge and thick magic shield enveloped his entire body. The shield, brimming with demigod magic aura, was obviously able to absorb a lot of damage. Damage? Who said anything about hurting you? A teasing smile appeared on the Black Dragon Princess' face. "My master wants me to play with you." With that, the Black Dragon stretched out its huge claws and picked up the 5-meter-tall Major Domo. To be fair, this guy was quite heavy, but in front of the Black Dragon Princess, who had an even more exaggerated body size, he was just a ball. Ragnaros' power did make him immune to all kinds of physical and magical damage, but it didn't fix him to the ground. As a result, Onyxia grabbed him together with the magic shield, tossed him into the sky, and caught him again. "Toss it up and catch it." Just like the moral integrity of a certain person who keeps throwing away and picking it back up, on the other side, Varian, who already had the experience of fighting the ghost wolf Rogosh, directly faced the incinerator Gearmanger's attack with his dual-wielding berserker stance. There were many others who were stronger than William. There were many who were more agile than Varian. However, there were very few people like Varian who could combine strength and agility so perfectly. When he dodged, he was like a light and cunning wolf, easily using his agility to avoid Gearmanger's heavy punches. The moment he switched from dodging to attacking, he suddenly became the most violent wolf king. Using the divine artifact dual swords that were like his own claws, he crazily slashed at the joints of Gearmanger's arms and legs. The hard rock limbs that mortal weapons couldn't damage turned into flying rocks under the continuous slashes of the divine artifact dual swords. Arg, Gearmanger was infuriated, and he chased after Varian crazily, completely ignoring the fact that there were actually other powerful mortals behind him, such as the Van Cleef father and daughter, and Vale Era, who were secretly and effectively destroying his limbs. Unfortunately, Varian's moment of glory only lasted for a few dozen seconds. Soon, Gearmanger's attention was attracted by another person. In order to kill Gearmanger as soon as possible, Mograine desperately slashed with Ashbringer, easily attracting the Molten Core Giant's attention. Divine artifacts were also divided into different levels. Ashbringer was a high-level divine artifact, and its power was obviously above Varian's, Shadow Ripper, and Shadow Plunder. Duque glanced at it and snickered. According to the game's terminology, it was OT, which meant that the boss's aggro was out of control. Usually, if the boss attacked and chased after people randomly, the whole team would not be far from being wiped out. However, the people here were all famous and powerful people. As long as they were given enough time, they would even dare to kill the boss by themselves. In the face of Gearmanger's heavy punches and the water tank-sized flame blast attack, Mograine wasn't alarmed. Instead, he was delighted. He directly swung Ashbringer, which was the size of a door, and put on a good show of cutting the fireball in half with a giant holy light sword. Seeing that his senior was so fierce, Varian bared his fangs, which was rare for him. On the right side of the battlefield, Duque was fighting with Saffron, the Forerunner. In the first exchange, Saffron directly stabbed out a swift and violent black light in the void. Duque's figure moved, and with a sidestep, he seemed to have dodged the spear thrown by his opponent by a hair's breadth. The half-black spear with a dull color brushed past less than 5 centimeters from Duque's cheek, and the strong wind it brought made Duque's cheek hurt. No matter what, he still managed to dodge it. The Forerunner Saffron was very surprised. In his eyes, mortal mages were all powerful in magic, but lacked in agility. He didn't find it strange that Duque could use any kind of magic to block his spear. He found it strange that Duque dodged it with simple combat moves. At this moment, Duque's heart entered a very mysterious state. He was clearly holding a staff in his left hand, a sword in his right, and wearing a robe that was so long that it almost touched the ground. He looked like a nondescript swordsman in plain clothes, but his movements were abnormally agile under the effect of the haste spell. The divine sword Xiandolf in his hand glowed with a dim glow that was only on the surface. If possible, Duque could strike with his sword at any time with all his strength. Right now, it was only because Duque had restrained almost all the converted mana on the sword that it didn't have much effect on the surrounding environment. In a battle below the Breaking Dawn level, there would often be a turbulent flow of elemental elements as soon as the two sides made a move. If one was not careful, the overflowing shockwaves would cause nothing to grow within dozens of meters. After reaching the Breaking Dawn level, the battle became more low-key and reserved, and also more dangerous. The degree of control over mana determined the amount and purity of the mana that could be compressed. It was too easy for a magic sword made of high-purity mana to break the opponent's magic shield. Chapter 1165. Duque defended more than he attacked, because he needed to recover. In order to successfully open up the situation, he almost poured out all his magic power in one go. Even with the speed of a third-class Breaking Dawn mage's magic recovery, it would take a long time. Of course, if Duque could find an opportunity to use the arcane magic recovery spell, Awaken, without getting injured, then it would be a different matter. However, before that, Duque had to give Pioneer Sapron enough pressure. Swoosh, a long, continuous sound of wind breaking rang out under Pioneer Sapron's armpit. Then, the seventh brother of the Molten Core felt the pain from that part of his body. The wound wasn't big, but it went straight through one of his two lungs on his left rib, and the flame aura that used to fill his lungs leaked out at a high speed. Roar! He was furious. A huge, flaming hand suddenly exploded around him, engulfing everything around him. The earth cracked, and the solid rock layers exploded into the air in large chunks, turning into smaller rocks, and then turning into powder and dissipating in the air. Unfortunately, he missed. Duque wasn't nearby at all, and even the one holding the dried tofu sword wasn't his main body. Almost at the same time that he let his mirror clone take his sword to work, he directly cast Invisibility and ran to the long-range team. The three Windrunner sisters looked at Duque, who had slipped here, and stared at each other. How can a weak boy like me go and fight with the enemy's monster leader like an uncouth old man? Dumo confidently said shamelessly. If they hadn't witnessed Duque beating up Nisario and risking his life to destroy Archimond, anyone would think that Duque was a coward. Queen Sylvia rolled her eyes at Duque. Aurelia, however, said, "Protect Duque." It had nothing to do with life or death, but it was about the recovery of magic power. The Awaken spell that Duque cast used a special method to stimulate the slightly overloaded magic circuit to return to its original position, filling it with a large amount of magic power. This was on the premise that Duque couldn't move, not even a finger, in the state of awakening. Once the casting posture was interrupted prematurely, the loss of magic power for every second of delay in awakening was equivalent to a radiant moon mage casting 1,000 top-notch fireballs. The three sisters who were connected stood in a standard equilateral triangle, firmly protecting Duque in the middle. The 10 seconds of awakening seemed short, but it was also very long. When Duque put down his raised hands, the three sisters secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Aurelia glanced at Pioneer Saffron, who was still foolishly playing hide-and-seek with Duque's mirror clone in the distance, and suddenly sighed. Duque was clearly a mage, but he played like a thief. It was precisely because he was stabbed so hard just now that that fellow mistakenly thought that Duque was born for sneak attacks. Just now, when Duque's magic power was all used up, this fellow didn't seize the opportunity to counterattack, and now it has no hope. The main force of the heroes were attacking Gearmanger the Incinerator, and the other warriors and knights who were carrying elite guards did not fall behind. With a glance, Duque knew that everyone was carrying the monsters in name, but in fact, they were all secretly killing the monsters. If you, Duque, can carry a boss on your own, then I can kill 1 or 2 rare elites, right? Relying on the long duration of his deity's descent talent, seeing that everyone was almost done fighting, Magni decided to transform. His mountain-like body made of silver metal gave the 3 guards opposite him a fright. It was already too late when they wanted to run. Bam! With a loud sound, Magni directly smashed his hammer on the ground and activated Thunderstrike. The powerful electric currents instantly numbed the bodies of the 3 elite guards. Magni strode forward with his short legs, which were still short even after his enlarged body, and made a beautiful leap, throwing out his Tempest warhammer in midair. This was the real Azeroth, not that digitalized game. Perhaps non-human creatures had unimaginably tenacious vitality, but as long as their vitals were hit, they would still be heavily injured or even die. After Magni became bigger, the Storm Warhammer that he threw out was also a size bigger. The hammer, which contained the power of heavenly lightning, directly smashed the head of a guard into a rotten watermelon. With a backhand swing, Magni directly chopped off the neck of the guard with the arcane number 2 above his head. Apart from Magni, Gavin Rad and the rest of them also had achievements. Of course, the greatest achievement was still in Duque's hands. The strength of fire demon leaders was based on their seemingly endless skills and spells. For those who were fighting for the first time, every fire demon leader represented the unknown and danger. For Duque, Pioneer Saffron was very familiar with everything. As long as he didn't transcend his fate and create skills that only belonged to him and were unknown to outsiders, he had no secrets from Duque. Dozens of hands of magic floated in midair and rained arcane bullets, non-stop. Duque and his dozen illusions ran around Saffron and left all kinds of wounds on the fire demon leader. The new wounds were then exploited by the hands of magic controlled by the system, which deliberately attacked the new wounds to expand their achievements. Throw the roaring flame spear, the hand of Ragnaros. Duque couldn't do anything about it, but why don't you use your ultimate skills consecutively? In the past 25,000 years, the leaders of the Molten Core, who barely had any battle experience after the War of Domination, mostly only had a few tricks up their sleeves and lacked the ability to adapt. After the veterans of the heroes figured out the pattern, they didn't need Duque's command at all. They kept attacking the enemy with their own understanding and judgment of the battle. Almost at the same time, Gyurmang the Incinerator and Pioneer Saffron fell. Manager Majordomo Executus almost pissed his pants when he saw the 2 leaders whom he was most proud of kneeling on the ground. Their 3 elite guards also followed in the footsteps of the 2 leaders after the heroes shifted their firepower. They were all wiped out in a short span of 20 seconds. He had already lost his temper after being tortured by Xianxia. Timid as he was, he shouted on the spot, Don't kill me. I surrender. Surrender. The experts who had been sharpening their weapons and preparing to add another record to their accomplishments were all stunned. Everybody knew that Duque never intended to kill this guy, but this guy was too spineless. Gavin Rad whistled. Oh, boss, now that you have the Black Dragon Princess as your mount, you want a fire demon leader to be your butler? I don't dare to wander around your house anymore. Duque smiled and didn't say anything. Chapter 1166. Duque waved his hand, and the other teams immediately went to work according to the plan. As the leader of the Molten Giants, the death of Gyurmanger the Incinerator only meant that there were no new Molten Giants in the Molten Core, but the existing giants would not automatically die. This was a little different from the Molten Hound King's mechanism. Duque did not know why. It seemed that after torturing Majordomo Executus, Onyxia's depression had been greatly alleviated. Duque had not even used his 9-tailed whip. He only said a few words to her, and she happily brought the main force back. Only a standard team was left here: Duque, Gavin Rad, Kalia, Sasha, and Edwin Van Cleef. Majordomo did not dare to move. If Duque was not here, he might have some other ideas. But since Duque, who had just single-handedly killed Saffron's forerunner, was here, he would not dare to move even if he had 10 more guts. I'll listen to you. Don't kill me. Major Domo lowered his body as much as possible, curling his long tail together as he raised his hands. He even raised his scales, making his body look even more unprotected. Edwin, the boss who should have been eliminated in the death mines in history, had been the eyes and ears of the Marcus family for the past 20 years. He was jokingly called Duque's most loyal dog. He slowly approached Duque. Eyes flicker, beware of tricks. Edwin, I know what his trump card is. I've seen everything in the river of time. Edwin breathed a sigh of relief. There was nothing more awesome than a prophet coming to cheat. He hid his body, but Duque could clearly see through the system's mark that Edwin was very responsible for keeping his guard up. He sneaked behind the manager, and if Major Domo dared to attack, he would stab the manager's heart. Duque said, "Hey, I'm not afraid to tell you that besides the mainstream races like elves, dwarves, and gnomes, my subordinates are all elves and dwarves. Nagas, murlocs, and other creatures have served me for over 20 years. Recently, I even took in the Black Dragon Princess Xianxia as my mount. If you sincerely serve me, I don't mind having a fire demon butler. What I'm afraid of is that you still want to lure us to the core of the molten core and suddenly lure Ragnaros out to destroy us." The last sentence was said very slowly, but it was full of pressure. Duque had revealed Majordomo's final plan, scaring him out of his wits. He kowtowed again and again. "All right. I have no interest in your life. Take me to the treasure you hid in the mountains. I know you have a cute box." Executus was drenched in cold sweat. He had no idea how this human knew about the treasure chest he had hidden in his nest. He had secretly brought it out of the fire elemental realm. For hundreds of years, he had not let anyone else know about it except himself. Moreover, the word mountains pointed out the crux of the matter, telling him not to try any tricks. If he wanted to save his life, the only chance was to summon his big boss, Ragnaros. But Lager was not on the mountains. Seeing how Duke managed to scare the other party into a daze with just a few words, Sasha was also giggling secretly. Just as Duque and his party controlled Executus, the battle on the other side was coming to an end. The Allied army spent more than a day to clean up the molten core giants and the King of Flames that had attacked the water elemental base. Everyone was exhausted, tired, but it was worth it. Every hero had a smile on their faces. Even the powerhouses of the tribe had temporarily forgotten about the failure of Blackwing's nest and enjoyed the joy of victory. Using wooden wine cups the size of small barrels, they drank the strong liquor that was specially transported from the Iron Stove Castle and laughed heartily. Perhaps, only when there was a comparison would one know the difference. Following Duque was a series of victories, and fighting alone was extremely difficult. If it was not for the unforgettable hatred between the Alliance and the Horde, it might have led to deeper cooperation, and it was not impossible for the Horde to join the Alliance. What a pity! Woken sighed. Since Executus was under control, the locations of all the fire runes were clearly marked. There were still many fire elemental monsters blocking the way. In order to save time, Duque let Xianxia carry 2 teams of powerhouses and Duke Hydraxis to extinguish the fire. Since they had practiced many times beforehand, and with Duque, the master of dispatch, everything seemed so orderly. First, all the fire runes were destroyed to prevent future trouble. Then, the heroes advanced, and the elites of the water elemental team followed to clean up the remnants and maintain the safety of the supply line. Finally, the dwarves and gnomes engineering team continued to drive over. During this period, Duke had been squeezing Majordomo's dry goods. How much power has Ragnaros recovered? How much power did he put into this clone? What's the geological condition around the fire runes? The system genie scanned Executus at a frequency of 100 times per second, recording data such as the size of his pupils, heartbeat, and breathing. Duque had never used a lie detector before. He purely used the general principle of the lie detector and let the system genie simulate a lie detector program. Then, regardless of the consequences, as long as the system indicated that Executus' credibility was less than 80%, Duque would switch to the Shadow Priest and use Mind Lash or Mind Blast to teach him how to be a qualified captive. Because Duque set the standard too high, Executus was basically unlucky, and there were many cases of wrongdoing. Duque did not care. According to the original history, Executus was a traitor. On the surface, he surrendered to the players, but in reality he summoned Ragnaros and hoped that his master would take care of the players. However, his master was also a hot-tempered person. Before he took care of the players, he first took care of Executus. The famous hand of Savras, the Balrog Ragnaros, smashed down with his hammer. Executus, the 9th boss of the Molten Core, who had been managing the Molten Core for Ragnaros for hundreds of years, was completely reduced to ashes, be it in body or soul. Especially when this guy dared to play tricks and give Duque a fake treasure chest. Duque immediately turned around and ordered, "Xianxia, eat his tail." I've confessed, I still have a small treasure chest. Wait, I've already confessed, Chapter 1167. After offering the back of her neck and being bitten by Duque, Xianxia was very tame. She even opened up her spiritual world and let Duque search it. Duque even found some traces of N'Zoth. After all, N'Zotha's spiritual power had been here once. Duque would not believe that he did not leave anything behind. After Duque used the system elf to scan Xianxia's memories, he did not destroy them. A naive black dragon did not suit Duque's interests. He only did something similar to reformatting a computer's hard drive to an unknown area outside of Xianxia's memories. This brought Xianxia some pain, but she quickly accepted the fact. This was because Duque told her that this was a mark he had left on her soul. Now, Duque was not worried that Xianxia would turn the tables. Instead, he was worried that she would become a mount. It was necessary to retain some of her fierceness. Xianxia bit off Majordomo's tail and swallowed it in front of him. That was the best way for Duque to intimidate him. Drip, drip. Bright red blood splattered from the crisscrossing dragon teeth and dripped onto the ground. Majordomo was so scared that he peed his pants. "No, I was wrong. I was wrong. Don't kill me," he begged incessantly. Under the watchful eyes of Duque and the other heroes, he finally took out his real treasure. When everyone saw the strong natural and holy auras coming from the box, everyone's eyes were locked on it. Apart from a certain captive who had spent a lot of money on his treasure but had no status. Sasha could not control herself. She picked up a leaf that was emitting an intoxicating green aura. Sasha could clearly feel the leaf's attraction to her. It even seemed to be guiding her somewhere to do something. She let go of the leaf in shock. Something with spiritual power and even self-awareness was not ordinary. Is there a problem? Aurelia was very nervous. She almost pulled out the dagger at her waist and placed it on Majordomo's neck. Before the bitter Majordomo could defend himself, Duque had already concluded the matter. Duque smiled. "No, it's fine. It's an extremely rare treasure, the leaf of the ancient era. Good items can be said to be the best proof of self-worth that hunters and rangers can obtain in this era." "Is it a bow?" Aurelia asked. "Big sis and third sis first." Queen Sylvanas said immediately. Duque understood what Queen Sylvanas meant, but he could only smile bitterly. "First of all, there are exactly 4 leaves of the ancient era here. And if I remember correctly, at the very end, the longbow you will get will not be as good as the one you have now. So, this is more of a form of training. If that's the case." Sylvanas was a little disappointed. In the beginning, Aurelia and Sasha had followed Duque. They had gotten the Sun Fury longbow of the Phoenix in Karazhan, and Queen Sylvanas had envied them for a long time. However, after Queen Sylvanas, Lilith, and Tyrant had gotten 3 higher-quality lightstrike bows from Archimonde, Aurelia and Sasha's equipment had fallen behind. The 4 Windrunner sisters were not disappointed for long. At this stage, other than equipment, their skills had almost reached the peak. In order to step into the demigod realm, they obviously needed more training, improvement, and even miraculous encounters. The four sisters were very happy to receive the leaf of the ancient era. Another thing that made Duque happy was the four holy eyes. As long as he could get the corresponding shadow eyes, he would be able to get the only proof of being an awesome priest in this era, blessing. It wasn't accurate to call it blessings, because after completing the epic quest that was triggered by the holy eye, the weapon obtained was a divine priest item that could freely switch between the holy, blessings, and the shadow, curse, forms. In the future, any priest who did not have a blessing or curse would be seen as unqualified by the elders who had experienced the molten core. Thinking back to before Duque had transmigrated, he had been forced by his team leader to create a smurf priest account to make it easier for him to find a job. That was how he became the chief priest of the team and even the guild, ahem. Perhaps this was why Duque was so skilled at taking on the role of a priest. Of course, Duque, with his awesome equipment, could not use blessing, but the new members, Kalia and Sally, needed it. Before returning from the ancient war, Duque had never thought that these two would join the hero team. He did not reserve any equipment for them either. Now, the molten core was definitely the best of the best for the newbies. Kalia had changed from the lowest epic level staff, Jordan's staff, to blessing. Sally Whitemane had changed from a completely mediocre excellent level staff, staff of justice, to blessing. Sally was so excited that she wanted to run up and give Duque a kiss when she saw the projection of blessing from Duque's memory. Basically, the newbies had gained a lot after defeating the 9 bosses in the molten core. Didn't they see that William and the other two, who were previously extremely poor, were now glowing with purple light? Even Gina Goldsword, who was theoretically almost Jaina's stepmother, had gotten a one-handed magic sword, Song of the Azure Sky, that countless mages had fought for before Duque transmigrated to this world. It couldn't be helped. Those who had spent Mount Hyjal with Duque had long surpassed this batch of newbies in terms of equipment. Since the older members did not want it, the newbies could only benefit from it. Of course, there were also some dramatic scenes. Valilla Seguner, who had also lived a hard life with William for a long time, ran to Vanessa after getting Executus, Molten Fang's, dagger. She compared her dagger with Vanessa's, and as expected, Valilla burst into tears, sigh. It was infuriating to compare oneself with others. Why did you have to compare yourself with Vanessa, the maid who had followed Duque for the longest time, the one who was actually a hatchet man and a roasting robot? Duque shook his head and said in his heart, "Girl, you're asking for it." Unexpectedly, Duque did not choose to immediately gather all the heroes to attack Ragnaros. Instead, he slowed down his attacks. On one hand, he would organize armed parades in front of Blackwing's nest from time to time. On the other hand, he even had time to let the kings and dignitaries take turns to rest and rush back to the country to deal with government affairs. Just like that, it was September 21st of the Dark Portal. Chapter 1168. The former prince of the Black Dragons and current king of the Black Dragons, Nefarian, was no fool. He was puzzled and uneasy by Duque's display of power. The Alliance's hero group had slowed down their attacks and even had the time to parade in front of Blackwing's lair. This was a warning to him. Of course, he knew what kind of people the Blackhand brothers were. If they dared to leave Blackrock Mountain when the Alliance's strongest forces were free, they would be courting death. In addition, the Molten Core's fire elemental monsters had all been withdrawn. Nefarian had no choice but to order the Blackrock Beastmen to retreat. There was something else that almost drove Nefarian crazy. The princess of the Black Dragons, Onyxia, actually surrendered after being defeated and willingly became the human magician Duke Marcus's mount. At first, Nefarian thought that it was a smokescreen released by the humans. Later, when Nefarian's shadow clone went to the front lines to supervise the retreat, he coincidentally saw Onyxia running over to launch an air attack on the retreating Blackrock Beastmen. Nefarian then realized that his sister had really fallen. "Onyxia, you're crazy. You actually became a lackey of the humans?" Nefarian's illusion roared at the familiar figure in the sky. To be honest, Onyxia did not want to face her brother like this. This scene was like a certain island girl pretending to be an obedient girl in the day, and at night she ran into her brother at the bar. Just imagining the drama and *T would make one want to die of embarrassment. At that moment, Onyxia's 10-meter-long dragon body visibly twitched. The originally agile snake-like dragon neck was like some kind of rusty machine, unable to turn for a long time. For a few seconds, Onyxia wanted to just walk away and escape from reality. In the end, she managed to stop herself. She flapped her huge black wings that were almost fully healed and hovered not far above Nefarian's illusion. "Oh, my dear brother, are you trying to say that I'm a disgrace to the dragon race? Alright, since Alexstrasza was once captured and tortured by the beastmen, I want to say that I'm not the most shameful one." Onyxia's lack of ambition almost made Nefarian faint from anger. "Where's your ambition? Where is your pride? Where's your dignity as a dragon?" Nefarian roared at the sky. She seemed to shrug her shoulders, but she didn't. "Sorry, my eldest brother. How insignificant were these things in front of the power of destiny. When you have the chance to face Duque, you will know that you are actually fighting against the god of fate." Nefarian was at a loss for words. After a long while, he said, "You are willing to give up on yourself. You are willing to become a human's mount and dog just to go against me? Don't forget. You're no match for me." Onyxia had an indifferent look on her face. "Fallen? Perhaps. Although the humans are now saying that I have forsaken the darkness for the light, whether or not I should fight with you, I really have not thought about it. Perhaps, with Duque's encouragement, I might really have the courage to fight you." Nefarian suddenly remembered something. "Wait, Onyxia, did Duque bite you on the back of your neck?" A rare blush appeared on Onyxia's dark dragon face. Mortals would not be able to tell the difference, but Nefarian, who was of the same dragon race, could tell at a glance. "You." At this moment, Nefarian was on the verge of breaking down. Regardless of whether he admitted it or not, he seemed to have become the brother-in-law of a lowly human that he looked down on. If it was not an illusion but his real body, it was very likely that he would have vomited blood at this moment. "You useless thing. From today onwards, I will no longer admit that I have a shameful sister like you. You are exiled, Onyxia. Every black dragon will see you as an enemy," Nefarian said ruthlessly. Unfortunately, he was only halfway through his sentence when Onyxia's invisible pretentiousness choked him back into his stomach. "Duque has already spoken to Alexstrasza. He said that after observing me for a period of time in the Dragon Slumber Shrine, he will consider conferring me the title of Earth Guardian." Nefarian spat. If he was an old man with a weak heart, he might have died of a heart attack. He and her father, the Wing of Death, Nisario, had cheated the other 4 dragon clans in the ancient war. That was why the Black Dragon clan had the glory of suppressing the 4 dragon clans for 10,000 years. In the circle of black dragons that were popular for being sinister and cunning, most of them saw Nisario's betrayal as a wise and heroic move. Well, now the title and responsibility that their father did not want and spurned back then had actually been taken back by his own sister. Wasn't this a slap to the face for him and his dead father? Not only was it a slap to the face, but it was also a slap to the dragon teeth. All the harsh words and all the vicious curses that Nefarian could think of were stuck in his throat. He could not say anything for a long time. "How are you? You've got guts. You've obviously fallen shamelessly, but you've actually fallen to the point of reason. Onyxia, I'll give you one last chance. Immediately fly to the highest point of the Blackstone Tower, kneel to me and beg for my mercy. Otherwise, when I'm free, I'll definitely hang your dragon head on the main entrance of the Blackstone Fortress and show all the dragons in the world your final fate." Before Onyxia could answer, she suddenly saw the flash of a portal beside her. A burst of light lit up, and Duque's figure appeared on the dragon saddle on Onyxia's back. Duque patted her lightly, and Onyxia immediately understood. She immediately descended, and her huge body shrank at a high speed. In the blink of an eye, she turned into the appearance of Countess Katrana. In front of Nefarian, Duque hugged Onyxia from behind and gently bit the back of her neck. Onyxia did not resist, and just let Duque do as he pleased. Nefarian's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets when he saw this. Unfortunately, he could not stop all this at all, because he was just an illusion here. Looking at Nefarian, who was trembling with anger, Duque laughed and directly made Onyxia gasp for breath. Yo, Nefarian, you seem to have forgotten something, right? Do you remember? Who let your father's head be hung on the main entrance of the Dragon Sleep Shrine? Nefarian shuddered and immediately recalled the horror of Duque in the past. That's right. It was this seemingly inconspicuous mortal in front of him who single-handedly planned 2 ambushes. The first ambush directly killed the strongest of the black dragons, Nethario. The second ambush directly subdued the noblest female Onyxia of the black dragons. Nefarian, you're the target of my 3rd hunt for the black dragons. Chapter 1169. Nefarian, do you dare to come out of your lair and fight me? Duque's declaration of challenge was so domineering. Onyxia's beautiful eyes flickered, revealing a rare infatuation and fanaticism. How could the noble princess of the Black Dragon submit to a mere mortal? Only such a great man with such spirit. Only such a peerless powerhouse who drove the world forward. That was enough for her to be willing to submit to him. She witnessed with her own eyes how Duque completely overwhelmed her brother in terms of aura. This feeling, which she did not know was whether it was depravity or sublimation, dominated Onyxia's entire soul in an instant. Violent and blazing. That's right. This is the kind of male I want. It was impossible for Duque to hear Onyxia's shouts, and even more so, he didn't know that this was the ultimate weapon against Onyxia, a person who worshipped the strong to the bone. Nefarian was stunned. He was truly stunned. For a moment, he almost wanted to agree to Duque's challenge on the spot. A second later, Nefarian shrank back. Although Duque's reputation among the mortals was like the sun in the sky, it was simply unbearable in the Black Dragon clan. How did Nethario die? How did Onyxia die? Didn't he still fall into Duque's trap and die? Duque made it sound like a duel, but who knew if he would be the one challenging all the powerhouses of the Alliance and the Horde, as well as his disappointing sister? He had no way of knowing what the molten core looked like, but Duque had obviously freed up his hands. Moreover, as a rare great scientist in the Dragon Clan, Nefarian had always believed that with the passage of time, the chance of victory was on his side. When he thought of this, his refusal was logical. I refuse. You're just a mortal, you're not qualified for me to accept your challenge. Of course, if you and your laughable teammates have the ability to kill your way to my throne at the top of the Blackrock Spire, I don't mind personally granting you eternal death. Nefarian's phantom disappeared after letting out a few pretentious chuckles. Duque heaved a sigh of relief when he felt Nefarian's consciousness fading away. He immediately teleported back to Karazhan with Onyxia. As soon as they stepped out of the portal, Onyxia turned around and revealed a bright smile with a blush. Oh, my dear master, why do I feel that you don't want my brother to come out and fight with you? Duque patted the dragon and Onyxia immediately let out a coquettish cry of surprise. No sane commander would want to fight on 2 fronts, because that usually meant defeat and death. Although we used Majordomo to deceive the sleeping Ragnaros, the extinguishing of the flame rune will eventually trigger his nerves. Now, the only way to deal with Ragnaros was to scare Nefarian and prevent him from escaping. Of course, it's also a good choice if Nefarian comes out to die. Onyxia's eyes turned craftily. You're afraid that when we're dealing with the Fire Demon King, my brother will come out, right? That's why you're deliberately trying to scare him. Will this work? Duque's eyes flashed. I can't afford to take the risk, but how can he? After all, I'm a man with the titles of Dragon Slayer and Dragon Vanquisher. Since you black dragons like to play tricks, he will naturally overthink things. Overthinking things means that he is not decisive. Nefarian will definitely not dare to come out before his research is completed. Aren't you afraid that my brother's research, For someone who has already peeped into fate, your brother's research is not worth mentioning. Fate? Xianxia felt as if her heart was being violently tugged at. She could not be afraid of the strong, retribution, and revenge, but she was afraid of fate. Moreover, when faced with an existence that knew all your cards but could not do anything about it, the deepest despair would definitely drive her crazy. It was this helplessness and desperation that caused her to surrender. Suddenly, Xianxia knelt down. Master, did you know? You were too domineering just now, I like it. Huh. Duque felt that something was wrong. Wait, what are you doing? Didn't you always ask me to taste the dragon-taming whip? Now I'm taking the initiative to taste it. Looking up, Xianxia threw Duque a flirtatious and slightly bewitching look. Duque felt his bones go limp. Dragon taming was just a sideshow. Duque's attention was still focused on the molten core. During this period, Ragnaros's consciousness showed signs of awakening twice, but Major Domo, who was under Duque's control, managed to fool him. Finally, on the 16th of September, the great craftsman Gerben and Duke Hydasis came together to visit. Everything is ready. A dwarf and a water elemental. Even though they were two different species, they had the same fanaticism in their eyes. Duque smiled. I knew you could do it. On the 18th of September, the Alliance and the Horde invested almost all the powerful fighters they could. On the Horde side, only Thrall was left to guard the main city. On the Alliance's side, General Abendis guarded the Lordaeron continent, Bulang Bronzebeard and Reginald Windsor led the army to guard the Scorching Canyon and Burning Steppes, as well as Turalian who stayed in front of the Dark Portal. The rest of the people who were above the realm of heroes were all involved in this battle that would decide the fate of the Eastern Kingdom and even the entire Azeroth. If they failed, the enraged Ragnaros would not only destroy half of the Redridge Mountain, but the entire southern continent. The surrounding air was still hot and suffocating. Grom and the other powerful fighters of the Horde were not used to the cold spray on their shoulders and the strange mask that could be worn at any time. But seeing that all the powerful fighters of the Alliance wore it, they could only force themselves to use it. Fortunately, it was easy to operate. In theory, they only needed to press one of the white buttons on their shoulders to continuously spray out cold mist. According to Gerben, this could prevent them from suffocating to death by inhaling too much hot gas. Major Domo, who was supposed to be one of the leaders of the Molten Core, listened to Duque's lecture like a grandson. Wajin felt a strange sense of joy. For some reason, Wajin had a feeling that the hunt for the Fire Demon King would be quite successful. It wasn't just him. Everyone was about to face the powerful elemental demigod, Ragnaros, who was second only to the ancient gods. However, everyone remembered that Duke had killed so many powerhouses with no losses. At most, he had let Arthas escape. Everyone was brimming with confidence. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.